Hey guys, tonight, we're stumbling headfirst into the boozy, rowdy world of medieval drinking. Where ale was, breakfast wine was a flex, and getting wasted was practically a personality trait. Picture yourself in a dim, smoky tavern, the air thick with the sour tang of spilled beer and the roar of slurred laughter. Rough-hewn tables wobble under the weight of tankards, and a fiddler's tune battles the chaos in the corner. You're elbow to elbow with peasants' knights, and maybe a sneaky monk, all chasing that warm, fuzzy buzz. Fair warning, surviving a medieval bender might be tougher than outrunning a plague rat. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push through the creaky door of a medieval tavern, the kind of place where the floor's more mud than wood, and the scent of yeast and sweat hits like a fist. It's 1380, somewhere in England's muddy heartland, and this is the local hotspot. Torches flicker, casting shadows that dance across faces flushed from drink. You squeeze onto a bench, a stranger's elbow jabbing your ribs, and a barmaid sloshes a tankard of ale in front of you. It's cloudy warm and smells like a barn, but you take a swig because, well, water might kill you faster. Ale's the lifeblood here, safer than the cholera-laced streams outside. Historians note that medieval folk drank about a gallon of ale daily from kids to grannies because it was food, drink, and social glue all in one. The tavern's alive with chaos. A blacksmith's arguing with a tanner over who can chug faster, their voices drowning out the poor fiddler sawing away at a jig. You notice a guy in the corner face down in his own drool, and someone's drawn a rude sketch on his forehead with charcoal. Joke 1 looks like medieval Sharpies were just as brutal as ours, huh? The crowd's a mix, laborers, merchants, even a shady-looking cleric who's definitely not here for the sermon. Taverns were the great equalizer, where class lines blurred under the haze of booze. But don't romanticize it too much. That same cleric might knife you over a spilled pint. You take another sip, the ale's bitterness curling your tongue. It's not Bud Light, this stuff's thick, almost chewy, brewed with whatever barley or oats the village had left. Some brewer probably tossed in herbs like yarrow or bog myrtle, giving it a weird medicinal kick. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some taverns served cock ale, a brew, spiked with ground-up rooster for extra virility. Yeah, you're glad your tankard's just plain ale. The barmaid, a no-nonsense woman with a braid and a glare, refills your mug without asking. She's an alewife, brewing and selling her own stock, a common gig for women, until the church started muttering about sinful female brewers. Historians still argue whether this was economic rivalry or pure misogyny, but either way, her ale's keeping this place humming. The noise swells as a dice game erupts nearby. Two men, red-faced and swaying, slam coins on the table, betting their next day's wages. You lean closer, catching the glint of bone dice, probably sheep knuckles carved by some bored shepherd. Gambling's huge, but so's cheatin', and you spot a guy palming an extra die. The room feels like it's teetering on a knife's edge. One wrong roll and fists will fly. Taverns weren't just for drinking. They were stages for deals, fights, and the occasional marriage proposal gone horribly wrong. You hear a shout, and a tankard sails past your head, splashing ale on your tunic. Joke 2. Guess medieval interior decorators loved the wet dog aesthetic. You're starting to feel the ale's warmth spreading through your chest, loosening your thoughts. It's not just the alcohol. Medieval brews were low proof, maybe 2 to 3%, but they were chugged all day. You're basically hydrating with a side of buzz. The guy next to you, a farmer with hands like shovels, starts ranting about the king's latest tax hike. His words slur, and you realize he's been here since noon. Taverns were political hotbeds, where gripes about lords or crop failures turned into drunken manifestos. Sometimes those rants sparked riots. The 1381 Peasants' Revolt had its roots in places like this. The fiddler switches to a slower tune, and the crowd's roar softens just a bit. You notice the barmaid slipping a coin to a kid, maybe her son, who darts out into the night. She's got a business to run, but there's a tenderness there, a glimpse of the human under the hustle. You wonder about her life brewing at dawn, dodging lecherous drunks by night. It's a grind, but she's the tavern's heartbeat. Your tankard's empty again, and she's there with a fresh one, her eyes daring you to keep up. You're not sure you can, but the night's young, and the tavern's pulse is pulling you deeper. Across the room, a storyteller spins a yarn about a dragon, his gestures wild ale sloshing from his mug. The crowd eats it up, half believing, half mocking. Storytelling was tavern currency, and a good tale could earn you a free drink or a punch if it flopped. You try to focus, but the ale's making the room tilt, and the dragon's starting to sound plausible. Joke 3, maybe that cock ale's got you seeing fire breathers already. The tavern's a microcosm of medieval life, grubby, vibrant, and teetering between joy and violence. You're hooked, but you're also wondering how anyone survives a night here without a broken jaw or a pickled liver. As you drain your tankard, the barmaid's back, her smirk saying she's seen 100 nights like this. You're not just drinking, you're diving into a world where booze was power, community, and danger all in one swallow. The tavern's glow feels warmer now, or maybe that's just the ale talking. You lean back, ready for whatever this night throws at you, because in medieval times, getting wasted wasn't just a choice. It was a way of life. You're still reeling from the tavern's chaos, but now you're trudging through a muddy village at dawn, the air sharp with frost and the faint stink of livestock. It's 1390, and the sun's barely up, but folks are already sipping ale from wooden mugs as they stumble toward the fields. Ale isn't just a drink here, it's breakfast, lunch, and the only thing keeping dysentery at bay. You clutch a tankard of your own handed to you by a gap-toothed farmer who insists it's better than bread. The liquid's murky like pond water with ambition, and it coats your throat with a gritty warmth. This is the medieval grind ale as the lifeblood of every village from the plowman to the priest. You take a swig, wincing at the sour bite. Medieval ale was the cornerstone of daily life, with entire communities built around its production. Historical records show villages often had a communal brewhouse, where women alewives again turned barley into liquid sustenance. It wasn't just for getting tipsy. Ale was a calorie bomb, packing enough carbs to fuel a day of back-breaking labor. You're sipping what's essentially a meal, and it's no wonder kids as young as 5 drank small beer, a weaker brew that still beat the local well's bacterial stew. Your farmer friend chuckles at your grimace. Joke 1. What you think we drink for fun? This is survival fancy pants. The village hums with early morning clatter. Carts creak, a rooster screams, and somewhere a hammer bangs on an anvil. You follow the farmer to a ramshackle brewhouse, a low building with a thatched roof, and a door that sags like it's hung over too. Inside, an alewife stirs a massive cauldron, her arms muscled from years of this work. The air's thick with steam and the sweet fermenting scent of malt. She tosses in a handful of herbs, maybe rosemary or sage, depending on what the forest offered. You're fascinated, but also a bit grossed out. Hygiene's not exactly a priority, and that cauldron's probably never been scrubbed. A quirky tidbit, some brewers added brewed a secret herb blend to give ale a psychedelic kick. No wonder the village mystic's always got a mug in hand. You lean against a barrel watching the alewife work. She's not just brewing, she's the village's unofficial mayor, settling disputes and doling out advice between batches. Alewives were powerhouses, but their role's a hot debate. Historians still argue whether their decline came from guild monopolies or the church's smear campaign painting them as temptresses. Either way, this woman's got the whole village hooked on her brew. She catches you staring and hands you a ladle of fresh wort, the pre-fermented mix. It's sweet, sticky, and you're not sure if it's a gift or a dare. You sip, and she laughs, her eyes saying you're not cut out for this life. Outside, the village is waking up. You see a mother pour ale into a horn cup for her kid, who chugs it like it's juice. It's jarring, but this is normal. Water's a gamble, and ale's the safe bet. You wander past a baker's stall, where he's dunking bread in ale to soften it, and a blacksmith who's got a tankard balanced on his forge. Everyone's drinking all the time, and it's not about getting wasted. It's about staying alive. But let's be real. By noon, half the village is probably a little buzzed. You take another sip, feeling the ale's warmth settle in your bones. It's growing on you, like a weird cousin you didn't want to like. The farmer drags you to a field where workers are already swinging scythes, their tankards tied to their belts. He explains the rhythm: work, drink, work, drink. Ale breaks were as common as modern coffee runs, and lords often paid laborers in jugs of the stuff. You try to keep up hauling a sack of grain, but the ale's making your head swim. Joke too, maybe medieval cardio was just dodging the taxman while tipsy. The field's a patchwork of barley and rye crops destined for the brewhouse. You realize ale's not just a drink, it's the economy tying the lord's manor to the peasant's hut. You pause under a tree, catching your breath. The farmer's telling a story about a rival village's ale, which he swears was cursed and made everyone dance naked at midsummer. You're not sure if he's joking, but the way he grips his mug suggests he believes it. Superstition swirled around ale, with some claiming bad batches were the devil's work. You glance at your tankard, wondering if that Groot's got any surprises. The alewife's brews are famous, though, and her hut's always got a line of villagers trading eggs or cloth for a jug. She's the village's heartbeat, and her ale's the blood. As the sun climbs, the field gets louder. Workers sing their voices, rough but cheerful. It's a drinking song, something about a fox and a flagon, and you try to hum along but butcher the tune. The farmer slaps your back, nearly knocking you over, and refills your tankard from a jug. You're starting to see why ale's the great unifier. It's not just fuel, it's joy, gossip, and rebellion in liquid form. You overhear two workers plotting to sneak extra ale from the Lord's stores, their whispers bold with liquid courage. Joke 3 medieval HR probably had a field day with ale-related insubordination. By midday, the village feels like it's floating on a gentle buzz. You're back at the brew house, where the alewife's now pouring for a gaggle of women, their laughter spilling into the street. This isn't the raucous tavern from last night. It's quieter, communal, almost sacred. You realize ale's woven into every moment, work, rest, even prayer, since the local priest's eyeing a jug for sacramental use. Your tankard's empty again, and the alewife's already there, her smirk daring you to keep going. You're not sure you can, but the village's rhythm is pulling you along one sip at a time. You're swaying through a golden haze. Now the village's ale-soaked rhythm fading as you find yourself in a different kind of glow, mead the honeyed nectar of medieval dreams. It's 1375, and you're in a merchant's cozy hall, the air sweet with beeswax candles and the sticky aroma of fermented honey. The merchant, a wiry man with a velvet cap, presses a horn cup into your hand. The mead's amber, glistening like liquid sunlight, and one sip sends a warm floral rush through you. It's sweeter than the gritty ale you chugged in the village, but don't be fooled. This stuff's a velvet-gloved punch. Mead's not just a drink. It's a status symbol, a dangerous allure that's got you hooked already. You settle onto a cushioned bench, the merchant's wife eyeing you like you might steal the silver. Mead was a luxury brewed from honey when most folks could barely afford bread. Historical records show it was a staple at noble feasts, often spiked with spices like cloves or ginger to flaunt wealth. You take another sip, the sweetness masking the alcohol's bite, probably 10% or more, way stronger than village ale. No wonder bards sang of mead halls where warriors boasted until they passed out. The merchant's telling you about his latest trade, something about Baltic wax, but your head's buzzing and his words blur like a lullaby. The hall's small but fancy, with tapestries showing hunts and battles. A fire crackles, and a servant refills your cup, her hands quick to avoid the merchant's wandering gaze. You notice the mead's got a faint herbal kick, maybe meadow sweet, a medieval favorite for flavor, and some claimed magic. Here's a quirky tidbit some mead makers swore by moon, brewing fermenting under a full moon for extra potency, believing it stirred the soul. You're not sure about souls, but your head's definitely stirring. Joke one may be that moon shines while you're seeing two merchants now. You try to focus, but the mead's making the room tilt. The merchant's droning on, and you catch something about mead's role in deals, sealing pacts, toasting alliances. It was diplomatic glue, but also a trap. Get your rival drunk and they'd sign anything. Historians still argue whether mead's high cost made it a noble exclusive, or if clever peasants hid their own stashes brewing in secret. Either way, this cup's making you feel like royalty, or at least like you could fake it for a night. You raise your horn mimicking the merchant's toast, but slosh a bit on your sleeve. He laughs, but his eyes say you're out of your league. The servant brings a platter of bread and cheese, urging you to eat before the mead floors you. Smart move medieval folk knew to pace themselves, pairing mead with heavy food to slow the buzz. You tear into the bread, its crust flecked with ash from the hearth. The merchant's wife starts a story about a local lord who drank mead for 3 days straight and woke up married to a dairymaid. The room chuckles, and you join in, though you're not sure if it's true or just the mead talking. Joke 2, medieval Vegas had nothing on a mead-fueled wedding. You're starting to see why mead's got its mystique. It's not just the taste, it's the vibe, the way it turns a drafty hole into a golden dream. The merchant's now singing a ballad, his voice wobbly, but earnest, about a knight and his mead-soaked oath. Everyone joins in, and you mumble along, faking the words. Mead was the fuel of poetry, of epic nights, where boasts became legends. You imagine Viking mead halls all roaring fires and spilled horns, but this merchant's version is cozier, less axe-fighty. Still, you're feeling bold, like you could challenge someone to a duel, or at least a staring contest. The fire's dying down, and the hall's getting sleepier. You take another sip, the mead's warmth spreading to your fingertips. It's deceptive you're drunker than you thought, and the merchant's grin says he knows it. Mead's danger was its charm. It snuck up, turning sensible folk into poets or fools. You remember that village alewife's gritty brew. Mead's a different beast, less about survival, more about swagger. The merchant claps your shoulder, offering another pour, but you hesitate. Your head's already a carousel, and you're not sure you can handle more. Across the room, the servant's clearing cups or movements, quiet but deliberate. You catch her rolling her eyes as the merchant launches into another toast. She's seen this before, guests waltzing in seduced by Mead's honeyed glow, only to stagger out or worse. You wonder about her stuck serving while the elite sip their way to oblivion. Mead's a divider, two splitting those who can afford it from those who pour it. You push your cup away, trying to clear your head, but the sweetness lingers, tempting you back. The merchant's wife starts humming a soft tune that feels like a signal to wind down. The hall's glow feels fragile now, like the mead's magic might vanish with the dawn. You lean back, your thoughts syrupy, and realize mead's not just a drink. It's a spell, weaving stories status, and a sneaky kind of chaos. Joke 3, no wonder they called it honey wine. It's got you drunk on both. You're not ready to leave this hall, but the mead's pulling you deeper, and the night's far from over. You've left the merchant's honeyed haze behind, and now you're standing in a grand stone hall, its high ceilings swallowing the flicker of torchlight. It's 1360, and you're at a noble's estate, clutching a goblet of wine so red it looks like spilled rubies. The air's thick with the scent of roasted meat and the sharp, fruity tang of grapes fermented to perfection. Wine's not for the village mud dwellers you drank ale with here. It's the drink of the elite, a liquid badge of wealth and power. You swirl the goblet, feeling out of place among velvet-clad lords and ladies, their laughter polished but cutting. One sip, and the wine's bold, oaky warmth hits you smooth complex and worlds apart from that tavern's gritty ale or the merchant's mead. You're at a banquet, the kind where tables groan under platters of swan and peacock. Wine flows like a river, served from silver pitchers by silent pages. Historical records show wine was a major trade commodity shipped from Bordeaux or Tuscany to England's high tables, often costing more than a peasant's yearly wage. Only the rich could afford it, and they flaunted it using wine to signal their place above the ale-swigging masses. You take another sip, the tartness curling your tongue, and notice a bishop nearby his rings, glinting as he praises the vintage. Even the church loved wine sacramental, sure, but also just because it was delicious. The hall's a theater of status. A noblewoman in a jeweled headdress catches you staring and raises her goblet, her smile more challenge than welcome. You nod back, trying to look like you belong, but your rough tunic's giving you away. Wine wasn't just a drink, it was a social weapon, and you're holding it wrong. A quirky tidbit, some nobles added hippocras, a spiced wine mix with cinnamon and sugar, to show off their spice trade connections. You're drinking plain red, but it's still fancier than anything you've tasted before. Joke 1, Guess your village alewife never got the memo about nutmeg. You weave through the crowd, dodging a servant balancing a tray of goblets. The noble hosting this feast, a barrel-chested man with a gold chain, is toasting his latest hunt, his voice slurring just enough to hint he's deep in his cups. Wine stronger than ale, maybe 12% alcohol, and these folks aren't sipping for hydration. They're chasing prestige, and the drunker they get, the louder the boasts. You overhear a knight bragging about slaying a boar single-handed, though his swaying suggests he'd struggle with a squirrel now. Historians still argue whether wine's exclusivity drove class divides or just mirrored them, but either way, this hall's a world apart from the tavern's sweaty chaos. The banquet's getting roadier. A minstrel strums a lute, singing of love and betrayal, but half the guests are too tipsy to listen. You spot a young lord spilling wine on his doublet, laughing it off as his wife glares. The wine's loosening tongues, and secrets are slipping someone's muttering about a rival's shady land deal. You lean against a pillar, sipping slowly, trying to stay sharp. Wine's a truth serum, but it's also a trap. One wrong word here, and you're out of favor or worse. You remember the merchant's mead, all cozy and communal. This wine's colder, more calculated, like the people drinking it. A page refills your goblet, and you notice the wine's got a faint berry note, maybe black currant. It's good, too good, and you're starting to feel the buzz, a lighter, headier drunk than ale's heavy warmth. The noblewoman from earlier sidles up, asking where you're from. You mumble something vague, and she laughs, her breath wine-sweet. She's testing you, and you're failing, but the wine's making you bold. You ask about her headdress, and she launches into a rant about Venetian silk tariffs. Joke 2. Medieval small talk was just flexing your trade routes, apparently. You wander to a window, the cool night air, a relief from the hall's stuffy opulence. Outside, the estate's vineyards stretch into the dark rows of grapes that fuel this whole spectacle. Wine was power. Lords owned the vines, controlled the trade, and gifted bottles to curry favor. You think back to the village where ale was everyone's drink. Here, wine draws a line between you and them. The bishop's now arguing with a merchant about tithes, their voices sharp despite the wine. Even drunk, these people never stop scheming. You sip again, the goblet's weight, grounding you, but your head's floating. The minstrel switches to a slower tune, and the hall quiets just a bit. You see a servant slip a coin to a page, maybe a bribe to keep the wine coming. These lower folks navigate the elite's world with quiet cunning, and you respect it. They're surviving in a game rigged against them. The noblewoman's back, offering you a sip of her hippocras. It's syrupy, spiced, and burns going down. You cough, and she laughs, saying you're not refined enough for it. You're tempted to chug the whole goblet just to prove her wrong, but your vision's already blurry. The feast feels endless, a parade of wine and ego. You're drunker than you meant to be, and the hall's spinning all torchlight and velvet and half-heard whispers. You remember the tavern's raw energy, the mead's golden glow. Wine's different, colder a drink that demands you play the part. Joke 3. No wonder they called it claret. It's got all the clarity of a noble's motives. You lean against the wall, goblet in hand, watching the elite swirl through their boozy dance. You're an outsider here, but the wine's pulling you in one dangerous sip at a time. You've slipped away from the noble's wine-soaked hall, and now you're deep in the heart of a lord's great hall, somewhere in 1385, where a feast is spiraling into glorious drunken excess. The air's heavy with the scent of roasted boar, spilled ale, and the sweet tang of mead, all mingling under a haze of torch smoke. You're wedged at a long oak table shoulder to shoulder with boisterous knights, giggling ladies, and a few shifty-eyed retainers, all raising tankards and goblets in a chaotic symphony of toasts. The lord, a bearded giant in furs, roars for more drink, and servants scramble to keep up sloshing ale and wine onto the rush-strewn floor. This is no quiet dinner. Feasts like this were medieval marathons, where getting wasted was the main event. You grab a tankard of ale, its familiar sour bite, grounding you after the wine's haughty kick. These feasts were the pinnacle of medieval hospitality, with lords spending fortunes to flaunt their wealth. Historical records from the time show that a single banquet could drain a manor's coffers with hundreds of gallons of drink served over days. The table's a battlefield of food, venison, pies, even a whole swan, its feathers reattached for drama. You're offered a goblet of mead, and its honeyed warmth reminds you of the merchant's hall, but here it's guzzled, not savored. The lord's shouting about a recent victory, and you raise your tankard caught up in the roar, though you're not sure what you're toasting. The hall's a riot of color tapestries, banners, and the lord's hounds weaving through legs snatching scraps. A minstrel strums a raucous tune, but he's drowned out by laughter and clinking cups. You notice a knight, his face flushed, trying to balance a dagger on his nose. He fails, and the blade clatters onto a platter, earning a howl from the crowd. Joke 1: medieval party tricks were just foreplay for the infirmary. The excess is staggering. Servants keep pouring, and nobody's saying no. You're already tipsy, the ale and mead mixing into a warm fog, but refusing a drink here feels like insulting the Lord's honor. You take a bite of bread hoping to slow the buzz, but a lady next to you shoves a slice of spiced pork your way, insisting you eat like a warrior. Food and drink were weapons of generosity, meant to bind guests to the Lord's cause. A quirky tidbit: some feasts served subtleties. Sugar sculptures shaped like castles, or saints, meant to dazzle before being smashed and eaten. You spot one on the high table, a wobbly lion that's already missing a paw. The lady's telling you about a rival lord's feast, where the wine ran out and guests rioted. Historians still argue whether these feasts strengthened alliances or just bankrupted hosts. But right now, it's hard to care. You're swept up in the chaos. The Lord stands swaying and calls for a drinking contest. Two knights, already wobbling, grab massive horns of ale, chugging while the crowd chants. One spills half down his tunic, and the other burps so loud it echoes. You're laughing your own tankard sloshing, and you realize this is the point: excess as spectacle. The lady nudges you, daring you to join, but you wave her off your head, spinning. You're starting to see why these feasts were legendary. They're not just meals, but battles against sobriety. You grab a goblet of wine, why not? And its sharp bite cuts through the mead's sweetness like a noble's sneer in the village tavern. A servant trips, sending a pitcher of ale crashing, and the crowd cheers like it's part of the show. The floor's a swamp of spilled drink and bones, and you're glad your boots are sturdy. You overhear a retainer muttering about the Lord's debts, his voice low but bitter. Feasts like this could ruin a family, but nobody's thinking about tomorrow. You take another swig, the wine's warmth spreading, and notice a young page, barely 12, sneaking sips from a discarded cup. Nobody bats an eye. Drinking's universal here, from cradle to grave. Joke 2: medieval babysitters probably just handed out tankards and called it a day. The minstrel switches to a bawdy song, and the hall erupts, guests banging tables and singing off-key. You try to join in, but the words are a drunken blur, and you're distracted by a knight arm-wrestling a cook, both red-faced and giggling. The excess feels reckless, almost desperate, like they're drowning some deeper fear, plague war, or just the grind of medieval life. You remember the village's ale, practical and communal. This feast is a flex, a middle finger to scarcity. The lord's now dancing with a serving girl, his wife glaring, but raising her goblet anyway. You're impressed. She's matching him. Drink for drink. Your head's heavy, and you lean back, watching the hall pulse like a living thing. The lady's telling another story, something about a feast, where a jester drank so much he fell into the fire. You're not sure if it's true, but the crowd's eating it up, their laughter sharp and wild. You're drunker than you planned the ale mead, and wine a chaotic trio in your veins. The Lord calls for another round, and you groan your tankard already full. Joke 3 medieval portion control was just drink until the table's your pillow. You're caught in the feast's tide, and there's no escaping. Not that you want to, not yet. You've stumbled out of the Lord's boisterous feast, your head still swimming from wine and mead, and now you're crouching in a dim, earthy hovel, the air thick with the sour funk of fermenting grain. It's the tree Naisitu, and you're in a peasant's home, somewhere in a muddy English hamlet, watching a woman knead barley mash with calloused hands. She's brewing ale, but not the polished stuff of taverns. This is gritty, experimental homebrew, the kind peasants concocted to stretch their scraps into something drinkable. You're handed a clay cup, the ale inside, cloudy and sharp, like it's daring you to complain. This is the underbelly of medieval drinking, where survival meets ingenuity, and every sip's a gamble. You take a cautious gulp, the brew's bitterness clawing your throat. Peasant homebrewing was a cornerstone of rural life, with families making ale to supplement meager diets. Historical records show that households often brewed weekly, using whatever grains, barley, oats, even moldy rye they could spare. Water was a death trap, so ale was the go-to, even if it tasted like regret. The woman, her face lined from years of toil, stirs a cauldron over a smoky fire, muttering about the harvest. Her ale's not for profit, but for family, though she might barter a jug for eggs or a hen. You're struck by the contrast to the Lord's feast, their excess. Here, necessity. The hovel's cramped with a dirt floor and a single rushlight casting jittery shadows. A kid, maybe 6, tugs at your sleeve, offering a crust of bread to chase the ale. You accept, chewing slowly to mask the brew's bite. Homebrewing was a woman's domain, but it was no glamour job. Hours of grinding grain, hauling water, and praying the batch didn't sour. A quirky tidbit, some peasants tossed in magic ingredients like nettle or even animal bones, believing they'd boost strength or ward off spirits. You eye your cup, hoping there's no hoof in this one. Joke 1 medieval homebrew was basically a potion class with no professor. You sit on a wobbly stool, watching the woman strain the mash through a cloth, her movements precise. Despite the chaos, 2 kids bickering a goat, bleeding outside. She's a brewer mother and farmer all at once, and you're in awe of her grit. Homebrew wasn't just sustenance, it was defiance, a way to dodge the Lord's pricey ale monopoly. Historians still argue whether peasant brewing undermined manorial control or just kept families alive. But either way, this woman's cauldron is her rebellion. She catches you staring and smirks, handing you another cup. You're not sure you can handle more, but refusing feels like spitting on her work. The ale's starting to hit a slow, heavy buzz that's less flashy than the noble's wine, but just as potent. You notice a neighbor poke her head in trading gossip for a sip. Homebrewing was communal, a web of favors and shared jugs that knit the village together. You overhear talk of a bad crop, the Lord's latest tax, and a rumor about a cursed well. The ale loosens tongues, and suddenly you're part of the circle, nodding like you understand their woes. You remember the tavern's rowdy dice games. This is quieter, but no less vital, a lifeline in a world that grinds peasants down. You take another sip, and it's growing on you like a stubborn weed. The brew's rough, flecked with bits of husk, and you're pretty sure it's not sanitary, but it's honest. The woman's husband stumbles in a plowman with dirt-caked boots and grabs a cup without a word. He downs it in one go, then grunts about the fields. Ale's their fuel, their medicine, their escape. You try to imagine brewing like this every week, your hands blistered, your back aching, all for a drink that might turn to vinegar. Joke 2, medieval DIY, was just hope it ferments and doesn't kill us. The fire crackles, and the woman adds a handful of herbs, maybe yarrow for luck. Superstitions baked into brewing with prayers, or charms to keep the ale sweet. You wonder if that's why this batch tastes better than the first cup, or if you're just getting used to it. The kid's back now playing with a wooden spoon, mimicking his mother stirring. You see the cycle brewing pass down, a skill as old as the hills. It's humbling, this tiny act of creation in a world of scarcity. You lean back, the hovel's warmth wrapping around you, and realize this ale's more than a drink, it's survival distilled. The neighbor's still here, her voice dropping as she whispers about the Lord Steward, who's been sniffing around for unpaid dues. Lays a shield too fueling defiance in hushed talks like this. You're starting to feel the buzz, your thoughts softening, and the hovel feels less grim, more like a haven. The woman's now singing a low tune about a river and a lost love, and the others hum along. You try to join, but your tongue's clumsy, and they laugh, not cruelly, but like you're one of them. Joke 3. Guess medieval karaoke was just slur the chorus and pass the jug. Your cup's empty, and the woman's already refilling it, her eyes daring you to keep up. You're drunker than you meant to be, the ale's weight settling in your bones. This isn't the golden glow of mead or the sharp strut of wine. It's earthier, like the people brewing it. You think back to the alewife's village, brew house, all hustle and trade. This is raw, a family's lifeline in a single cauldron. The night's deepening, the hovel's glow fading, but the ale's pulling you deeper, one stubborn sip at a time. You've left the peasant smoky hovel, the taste of gritty homebrew still lingering, and now you're slipping through the cool stone corridors of a monastery, the air sharp with incense and the faint yeasty whiff of brewing. It's the Trine 80, and you're in a Benedictine abbey, where monks in rough wool robes shuffle past their faces, serene, but their hands stained with malt. You're here to uncover their boozy secrets, because surprise, these holy men are knee-deep in ale and wine, brewing with a zeal that rivals any village alewife. You're handed a clay cup of monastery ale, its golden hue glowing in the dim cloister light. One sip, and it's smooth-spiced, almost divine, but with a kick that says these monks aren't as pious as they look. You follow a wiry monk, Brother Anselm, to the brewery, a low-roofed chamber, where barrels lined the walls like silent sentinels. Monasteries were brewing powerhouses, producing ale and wine for sustenance, charity, and profit. Historical records show that large abbeys could churn out thousands of gallons yearly, supplying their own tables and selling surplus to local markets. The ales crisp, with a hint of coriander, monks were master brewers, using recipes honed over centuries. You're impressed, but also a bit suspicious. This stuff's too good for just hospitality. Brother Anselm winks, saying it's for the soul's comfort. Yeah, right. The brewery's a hive of quiet industry. Monks stir vats, haul sacks of barley, and check fermentation with a focus that feels more alchemical than spiritual. You notice a barrel marked for the abbot's table. It's ale, likely stronger, reserved for high-ranking clergy. A quirky tidbit: some monasteries brewed Trappist precursors, ale so potent they were dubbed liquid bread for fasting days when solid food was forbidden. You take another sip, the warmth spreading, and wonder if fasting ever felt this fun. Joke one, medieval monks probably prayed for longer Lent, just to keep the barrels flowing. You lean against a cool stone wall, watching the monks work. Brother Anselm explains the process: malting, mashing, fermenting with a pride that borders on obsession. Brewing was sacred here, tied to hospitality and survival, but also a cash cow. Monasteries sold ale to pilgrims and villagers, banking coin for repairs or relics. Historians still argue whether monks drank for devotion or just loved the buzz, but the glint in Anselm's eye suggests both. He offers you a second cup, and you accept, though. Your head's already humming. The ale's smoother than the peasants' brew, but it's no less potent, and you're starting to feel like you're in a holy happy hour. The cloister's quiet, save for the distant chant of vespers, but the brewery's alive with purpose. You spot a young novice sneaking a sip from a ladle, his face guilty, but delighted. Nobody calls him out. Drinking's baked into monastery life, from daily rations to feast day binges. You remember the noble's wine, all status and scheming. This ale's humbler, but it's still power tying the abbey to the world outside. Anselm's telling you about a rival monastery's sour batch that sparked a feud. Monks take their brews seriously, and bad ale's practically heresy. You chuckle, but he's dead serious. You wander to a window, the glass warped, but letting in soft light. Beyond, fields stretch toward the horizon, some owned by the abbey and worked by tenants who pay in grain. That grain becomes this ale, a cycle as old as the hills. The monastery's a world unto itself, but booze is its bridge to the village, the market, the pilgrim's road. You take another sip, the spices tingling, and feel the buzz deepen. It's not the raucous drunk of the tavern or the lofty haze of wine. This is steadier, like the monks themselves, grounded, but sneaky. Joke two, maybe their vows included an ale we trust. Brother Anselm's now checking a barrel, tapping it with a knuckle like a doctor with a patient. He mutters about yeast, a word you didn't expect from a monk, but brewing was science before science was cool. You're fascinated by their precision water from a blessed spring, herbs from the abbey garden, even prayers over the vats. Superstition or not, it works. This ale's the best you've tasted. You think back to the peasant woman's cauldron, all grit and hope. The monks have resources, but the same stubborn craft. The novice is back now, hauling a sack, his cheeks still flushed from that stolen sip. The brewery's glow feels warmer now, or maybe that's just the ale. Anselm's telling a story about a pilgrim who drank too much abbey wine and swore he saw Saint Benedict in the privy. The other monks laugh, their voices soft. but genuine, and you join in, your cup raised. This isn't the Lord's chaotic feast or the village's desperate hustle. It's a strange mix of sacred and tipsy, a place where faith and fermentation coexist. You're drunker than you planned, the ale's warmth curling through you, and Anselm's already offering a third cup. You hesitate, but his grin says resistance is futile. The Vespers chant grows louder, and a bell rings calling the monks to prayer. Anselm sighs, wiping his hands on his robe, and you realize even he'd rather stay here. The brewery's a sanctuary within a sanctuary, where the rules bend just a bit. You think of the alewife's village, the merchant's mead, the noble's wine, each drink a world, each buzz a story. This ale story is quieter, but no less potent. A monk's secret shared one cup at a time. Joke 3. No wonder they called it holy water. It's got you seeing halos. You lean back, the stone cool against your shoulders, and let the ale pull you deeper into the abbey's boozy heart. You've slipped away from the monastery's yeasty glow, the monk's spiced ale still warming your veins, and now you're trudging through a misty village street, the air sharp with wood smoke and suspicion. It's 1395, and you're tailing a woman, her cloak heavy with the scent of malt, as she ducks into a shadowy alley. She's an alewife brewing for the local tavern, but whispers follow her like flies. Some call her a witch, her brews blamed for everything from sour milk to love-struck fools. You're here to unravel the tangled link between ale and superstition, where every tankard might hold a spell or a curse. She hands you a small jug, the ale inside, dark and bitter, and you sip, feeling the village's wary eyes on you. The ale's sharp with an earthy bite that reminds you of the peasant's homebrew. But there's a strange aftertaste. Maybe herbs, maybe something spookier. Alewives were the backbone of medieval brewing, but their craft came with a dark edge. Historical records show that by the late 14th century, successful female brewers faced accusations of witchcraft, especially if their ale was too good or their profits too high. You're standing in her brewing shed, now a cramped space with a bubbling cauldron and bundles of dried herbs hanging like omens. The alewife, her face etched with defiance, stirs the mash, ignoring the murmurs from the street. You take another sip, and it's strong, maybe 4% alcohol, enough to make you wonder if those bewitched villagers were just drunk. The shed's dim, lit by a single rushlight that flickers like it's nervous. You notice a charm, a twisted twig tucked above the door protection, she says, from ill tongues. Superstition swirled around alewives. Their brews were blamed for madness or lust, and a bad batch could spark a mob. A quirky tidbit, some alewives marked their barrels with hex-like symbols, meant to ensure good fermentation, but seen by paranoid locals as devil's work. You eye your jug, hoping it's just ale and not a love potion. Joke 1 medieval Yelp reviews probably gave her 1 star for cursed vibes. You lean against a barrel watching her work with a precision that feels almost ritualistic. She's not just brewing, she's navigating a minefield of gossip and greed. The church and male-dominated guilds were starting to squeeze women out of brewing, painting them as sinful or supernatural. Historians still argue whether these witchcraft accusations were rooted in economic rivalry or genuine fear of female power. But either way, this alewife's walking a tightrope. She catches you staring and snaps. Drink or leave, stranger. You gulp the ale, its bitterness, grounding you, and nod, trying to look like you're not spooked by the twig charm. Outside, the village hums with tension. You hear a man shout about a cow that died after drinking her ale, probably just bad water, but logic's no match for fear. The alewife's used to it. She keeps brewing her hand steady, her eyes daring anyone to cross her. You're starting to admire her, this woman who turns grain into gold despite the whispers. The ale's hitting you now, a slow buzz that makes the shed feel less grim, more like a rebel's hideout. You remember the monastery's orderly brewery. This is rawer, riskier, a lone woman stand against a world that wants her small. You take another sip, and the herbs maybe mugwort tingle on your tongue. Ale was a canvas for experimentation, but every odd flavor fed the witch rumors. You overhear a neighbor bartering for a jug, her voice low like she's buying contraband. Alewives were community hubs, but also scapegoats. A failed crop or a stillborn child could land them in a witch trial. You think back to the noble's feast, all swagger and excess. Here, every sip's a gamble for brewer and drinker alike. The alewife's now chanting softly, maybe a brewing prayer, maybe just to mess with you. You're not sure, but the ale's making you bold, so you ask about the rumors. She laughs a dry sound and says, "They'll burn me before they stop drinking." It's chilling, but true. Her ale's too good. Too vital for the village to shun her completely. You're drunker than you meant to be, the jug lighter in your hand, and the shed's shadows feel alive like they're whispering too. She's telling you about a rival brewer, a man who joined the guild, and now sells watered-down ale at double her price. The system's rigged, but she's still here brewing in defiance. Joke 2, medieval capitalism was just slander. Your competition at a hex. The street outside grows quieter, the village settling into dusk. You're starting to see why ale and witchcraft got tangled. Women like her had power, and power scares people. The ale's warmth is spreading, softening the shed's edges, and you're caught between awe and unease. She offers you another jug, but you hesitate, your head already cloudy. You remember the tavern's raucous dice games, the monk's holy buzz. This ale's different, laced with rebellion and risk. The alewife's eyes meet yours, and you feel like she sees right through you, like she knows you're half convinced she's a witch. Her chant stops, and she banks the fire, the shed growing darker. You're swaying the ale's buzz, mixing with the weight of her story. A woman brewing against the odds. Her craft, a spark in a superstitious world. You think of the mead's golden glow, the wine's cold strut. This ale's earthier, fiercer, like the woman who made it. Joke 3, no wonder they called her a witch. Her ale's got you under a spell. You step outside the jug, still in hand, the village's whispers fading as you stumble into the night. One sip deeper into her defiant world. You're back in the smoky haze of a tavern, the alewife's witchy brew still buzzing in your veins. But now it's 1382, and the air's alive with the clatter of dice and the slurred shouts of gamblers. You're squeezed onto a bench in a corner, the table sticky with spilled ale, watching a group of men bet their last coins on a roll. The tavern's dim torchlight flickering over weathered faces. Tanners, carpenters, maybe a rogue squire, all chasing luck and a cheap buzz. You're handed a tankard of ale, its familiar sour kick grounding you. But the real game here isn't drinking. It's the reckless, drunken bets that turn coppers into fortunes or fists. You toss a coin into the pot, feeling the tavern's pulse pull you in. The dice rattle in a leather cup, and the man rolling a burly blacksmith with a scar across his knuckles mutters a prayer to Saint Christopher. Tavern games were a medieval obsession with dice leading the pack. Historical records show games like Hazard were so popular, they sparked laws banning gambling among peasants, though nobody's enforcing that here. The ale's flowing, loosening fingers, and judgment, and you're already 2 cups in the room, tilting just enough to make the dice look like they're dancing. You take a swig, the ale's grit, reminding you of the village brewhouse, and place a bet, half a penny, all you've got. The crowd roars as the dice land, and you're out your coin swept into the blacksmith's pile. The tavern's a pressure cooker, all sweat and swagger. A skinny lad, probably a pickpocket, tries to palm an extra die, but a merchant spots him and yanks his ear. Cheating's common, and so are the brawls that follow. A quirky tidbit: some taverns used loaded dice carved from bone with hidden weights. To favor the house, medieval Vegas had nothing on these joints. You're tempted to check the dice yourself, but the blacksmith's glare says you'd lose more than a bet. Joke 1, guess medieval game night came with a side of black eyes. You grab another ale, its warmth spreading, and settle in to watch the chaos unfold. The game's heating up, and so's the room. A weaver, red-faced and swaying, bets his cloak, swearing it's fine wool. The others laugh, but they're just as reckless, tossing in knives, a belt, even a rusty spur. Ale fuels this madness. Nobody's this bold sober. You're feeling it too, the buzz making you bold enough to join the next round. You roll, and the dice betray you again. Your last coin gone. The blacksmith claps your shoulder, offering a pity sip from his tankard. You accept, though. You're starting to wonder how you'll get home. Historians still argue whether tavern gambling was a social release or a drain on village economies. But right now, it's just a thrill, and you're hooked. You lean back, the bench creaking, and notice a barmaid weaving through the crowd, her tray piled with tankards. She's dodging hands and insults with a practiced grace, her smirk saying she's seen it all. The tavern's a stage, and games are its drama. Love, rivalry, and ruin played out over dice and ale. You overhear a tanner boasting about a big win last week, claiming he bought a pig with it. His friend snorts, saying he lost it all the next night. You think back to the noble's feast, all calculated toasts. This is rawer a mess of human hunger. You take another sip, the ale's bite sharpening your focus, and toss a pebble into the pot, joking. It's lucky. The crowd laughs, but they let it slide. The dice keep rolling and the bets get wilder. A man offers his boots, another his day's wages. You're out of the game, but can't look away, the energy infectious. The barmaid's back, refilling your tankard without asking, and you're drunker than you planned, the ale blurring the edges of the room. Someone starts a drinking game nearby, chugging to a bawdy chant, and the loser, another gambler, vomits into a corner. Joke 2, medieval multitasking was just betting your shirt while holding your ale. You're laughing, but your head's heavy, and you're starting to feel the tavern's weight, its mix of joy and desperation. A fiddler strikes up a tune, and the gambling pauses as a few men stumble into a clumsy dance, their bets forgotten. You're tempted to join, but your legs feel like lead, and the ale's making the floor sway. The blacksmith's now arguing with the merchant over a bad roll, their voices rising. You brace for a fight, but the barmaid steps in her sharp tongue, cutting them down. She's the real boss here, keeping this chaos from boiling over. You remember the alewife shed all whispers, and which fear this tavern's louder, but no less precarious a place where one bad bet could spark a riot. Your tankard's empty, and you're debating another, when a new game starts, knucklebones played with sheep joints. You try a throw, and the crowd cheers your terrible aim, their laughter warm but mocking. The ales loosened you up, and you're starting to love this grimy, reckless world. You think of the monks' orderly brewery, the lord's lavish hall, this tavern's the people's domain, where ale and dice level the field, if only for a night. The blacksmith slaps down another coin, daring you to try again. You're broke, but you borrow a penny from a tanner, promising to pay it back. Joke 3 medieval credit scores were just, "I'll owe you an ale." The night's deepening, the tavern's glow dimming as torches burn low. You're swaying the ale and the games, a heady mix, and you realize this is what medieval life was: grit, risk, and a stubborn chase for joy. The barmaid's watching you, her eyes saying you're one bad roll from trouble. You raise your tankard anyway, caught in the tavern's spell, one dice throw deeper into its boozy betting heart. You're still reeling from the tavern's dice-fueled frenzy, the ale's buzz clinging to you like damp wool. But now you're staggering out into the night, the air sharp with frost, and the distant howl of a dog. It's 1387, and the tavern's chaos has erupted into a full-blown brawl spilling onto the muddy street. You dodge a flying tankard, its ale splashing your boots, as 2 men, a cooper and a farrier, trade sloppy punches their faces, red from drink and rage. The crowd's cheering, half drunk themselves, and you're caught in the middle, your own head foggy from too many tankards. Medieval drinking wasn't all songs and bets. It often ended in broken bones and bruised egos, and you're seeing that raw edge, now one fist at a time. You duck behind a cart, clutching your tankard like a shield. Drunken brawls were a staple of medieval life, with taverns as their breeding ground. Historical records show that coroners' rolls from the 14th century often listed tavern disputes as causes of death, from knife wounds to cracked skulls. The cooper's yelling about a cheated dice game, while the farrier swings a haymaker that misses and sends him sprawling. You take a sip of ale, its sour bite steadying you, and notice the barmaid from the tavern leaning against the door, smirking like she's seen this 100 times. She probably has ales the spark, and these fights are the fire. The street's a mess, churned to mud by boots and spilled drink. A torch sputters nearby, casting wild shadows, as a third man, a lanky tanner, joins the fray swinging a stool. It's less a fight now than a drunken wrestling match, all grunts and curses. A quirky tidbit: some taverns kept brawling fines, a tax on fighters to cover broken furniture, though it rarely stopped the chaos. You're tempted to bolt, but the crowd's energy is magnetic, and your ale-soaked brain wants to see who wins. Joke 1 medieval conflict resolution was just punch until you both need a nap. You edge closer, dodging a stray elbow, and spot a kid, maybe the barmaid's son, pocketing coins that fell from the cooper's belt. Smart kid. Brawls were profit for the quick-fingered. The ale's hitting you hard, making the scene blur like a bad dream, but you can't look away. Taverns were powder kegs, where slurred insults or a bumped tankard could ignite violence. You remember the noble's feast, all polished excess. This is the flip side, raw and unfiltered, where ale strips away civility. The farrier lands a solid hit, and the cooper staggers, blood trickling from his nose. The crowd roars, betting on the outcome like it's a cockfight. A woman, maybe the tanner's wife, shrieks for them to stop, but nobody listens. You're starting to feel the ale's weight, your legs wobbly, and you lean against the cart, sipping to stay grounded, the barmaid still watching, her arms crossed, and you catch her muttering about fools and their pride. She's the tavern's anchor, cleaning up after these storms. Historians still argue whether brawls were just drunken outbursts or deeper releases of class tension, peasants versus craftsmen, locals versus outsiders. Right now, it's hard to care. The fight's a spectacle, and you're drunk enough to cheer, though you're not sure for who. The brawl's spreading, pulling in more drunks from the tavern. A baker, his apron stained, swings a loaf like a club, and you can't help but laugh, spilling ale on your tunic. The chaos feels alive, a pulse of medieval life, grubby, reckless human. You think back to the monk's brewery, all calm and craft. This is its opposite ale as a wrecking ball. The cooper's back up, tackling the farrier into a pile of straw, and the crowd's bets get louder. You're tempted to toss in a coin, but your pouch is empty from the dice game. The barmaid's eyes meet yours, and she shakes her head like you're just another fool caught in the tide. A horn blows sharp and sudden, and the crowd scatters as a night watchman stomps in, his staff raised. He's a burly man, unimpressed by the drunks, and starts barking orders to break it up. The cooper and farrier freeze, panting, then slink off their fight, fizzling under the watchman's glare. The tanner's already gone, his wife dragging him home. You're relieved, but a bit disappointed. The brawl was awful, but it was alive. You take another sip, the ale's warmth cutting through the chill, and realize you're drunker than you thought the street, tilting like a ship. Joke 2, medieval cardio, was just dodging fists and running from the law. The barmaid's back inside, and you follow the tavern, quieter now, its energy spent. You slump onto a bench, your tankard still half full, and watch the stragglers nurse their drinks or their bruises. The watchman's outside lecturing someone, but the fight's left a strange camaraderie. Men who were swinging now clap each other's backs, sharing a jug. Alle's the villain, and the healer starting wars and ending them. You think of the alewife's witchy shed, all whispers and fear. This tavern's louder, but no less fragile a place where booze builds bonds and breaks them in the same breath. Your head's heavy, and you're starting to feel the night's toll. The barmaid slides you another ale, unasked, her smirk saying she knows you're done for. You sip anyway, the bitterness familiar, now like an old friend. The tavern's glow feels dimmer, the brawl's thrill fading into a sore, boozy haze. You overhear a man muttering about a broken tooth, another about a lost bet. This is the cost of medieval drinking, not just coins, but blood and pride. Joke 3, no wonder they drank all day. Sobriety meant facing the dentist. You lean back, the bench creaking, and let the ale pull you deeper, one bruised, buzzing sip at a time. You're stumbling away from the tavern's brawl, the sting of ale and bruised egos still sharp. But now it's dawn, 1390, and you're slumped in a village hovel, your head pounding like a blacksmith's hammer. The air's damp, smelling of straw and regret, and you're surrounded by a family of peasants, their faces grim as they offer you a bowl of something. It's a medieval hangover cure, and it looks like swamp, muck, onion broth, raw egg, and a pinch of dubious herbs. You're here to explore the bizarre, desperate remedies medieval folk swore by to tame the morning after misery. You choke down a spoonful, gagging at the slimy texture, and pray it works, because last night's ale is waging war on your skull. Hangovers were a medieval fact of life, with everyone from knights to plowmen battling the aftermath of constant drinking. Historical records mention remedies in medical texts, like the Taquinum Sanitatis, which prescribed everything from herbal infusions to bloodletting for overindulgence. You're lucky this family's too poor for leeches, but their broth's no picnic. The mother, her hands rough from fieldwork, insists it'll sweat the devil out. You're not sure about devils, but your stomach's staging a revolt. The ale from the tavern, the mead from the merchant's hall, the monk's spiced brew, they've all ganged up, leaving you dizzy and queasy. You force another sip, the egg's sulphurous tang making you shudder. The hovel's cramped with a low fire spitting smoke, and a toddler chewing on a crust nearby. The father, a wiry man with bloodshot eyes, swears by his own cure, more ale to balance the humors. You decline remembering the tavern's chaos, but he's already sipping from a jug, looking perkier. A quirky tidbit, some medieval cures included eating cabbage boiled in ale, or wearing a dead mole around your neck. Yep, a mole for vitality. You glance at your broth, suddenly grateful it's just eggs and onions. Joke one medieval medicine was basically, if it's gross, it's good for you. You lean against the wall, the straw scratching your back, and try to focus as the mother explains her recipe. She's no physician, but she's got a healer's confidence, tossing in willow bark for pain and nettles for cleansing. Medieval hangover cures were a mix of folk wisdom and desperation, with no real science to back them. Historians still argue whether these remedies worked or just distracted you with new miseries, but the family's faith in their broth is unshakable. You take another spoonful, wincing as it slides down, and feel a faint relief, or maybe that's just placebo. The toddler's staring like you're the village idiot for gagging. Outside, the village is stirring carts, creak of rooster crows, and someone's cursing a broken plow. You're struck by how normal this is. Everyone's hungover, yet life grinds on. The father's telling you about a time he tried a noble cure, milk thistle steeped in wine that left him sicker than before. You sympathize, your head still throbbing, and wonder how anyone survived daily drinking. You think back to the alewife's witchy shed, where herbs like mugwort sparked fear. Here, they're just medicine trusted despite the taste. The broth's starting to settle your stomach, or maybe you're just too tired to care. You're handed a cup of weak ale, small beer the father calls it, meant to ease you back. You sip the watery flavor, a pale echo of the tavern's brew, and it actually helps like a medieval Gatorade. Hangover cures were as much ritual as remedy, a way to reclaim control after a night of excess. The mother's now grinding herbs with a pestle, her movement steady, and you realize she's the family's anchor, brewing cures as vital as their daily ale. You're starting to feel human again, though your head's still a dull ache, and you're grateful for her stubborn care. The father's story turns to a local healer who sold hangover tonics laced with lead, swearing it was Roman wisdom. Half the village got sick, and he was chased out by a mob. You laugh, then wince, your headache flaring. Medieval remedies were a gamble with quacks, peddling poison as often as help. You think of the noble's wine, all status and swaggered, this hovel's humbler, but no less human, a place where pain meets persistence. The broth's gone, and you're not sure if it worked or just numbed you, but you're upright, which feels like a win. Joke 2, medieval recovery, was just survive the cure, and the hangover's a breeze. The toddler's now napping, and the mother's humming a tune soft and steady as she sweeps the hearth. You're struck by the quiet resilience here. No lord's feast, no tavern brawl, just a family piecing themselves together after another boozy night. The father offers you a bed of straw, but you're not ready to sleep. You want to understand this world where ales both curse and cure. You sip the small beer, its faint buzz soothing, and feel the hangover ebb just a bit. The mother's eyes meet yours, her nod saying you're tougher than you look. You're not so sure, but you're grateful for the vote. Your head's clearer now, the village's rhythm seeping back in. You think of the monk's brewery, all faith and craft, or the dice game's reckless thrill. This hovel's different, a raw fight against the body's betrayal. The father's back to his jug, claiming he's cured, though his sway says otherwise. You're starting to see the medieval cycle: drink, regret, recover, repeat. The mother hands you a sprig of mint to chew her last gift, and you accept the fresh bite cutting through the haze. Joke 3. No wonder they drank so much. Hangover cures were the real adventure. You step outside the dawn, cool on your face, ready to face the next sip. One shaky step at a time. You're still shaking off the peasant's slimy hangover cure, the mint's sharp tang lingering when you find yourself swept into the glittering chaos of a royal banquet 1378 in a castle's great hall. The air's thick with the scent of spiced wine, roasted stag, and beeswax candles, their glow dancing across gold-threaded tapestries. You're clutching a silver goblet. It's wine, a deep crimson, and you're surrounded by nobles' courtiers and a king who's already slurring his toasts. This is no tavern brawl or monk's brewery here. Drinking is a performance, a marathon of endless toasts, where you're expected to keep up or risk disgrace. You raise your goblet, the wine's oaky warmth hitting you, and brace for a night where standing upright is the real challenge. The hall's a spectacle tables piled with pheasant figs and sugar-dusted pastries shaped like crowns. Royal banquets were diplomatic chess with wine as the queen. Historical records like those of Edward III's court show kings spending fortunes on wine barrels from Gascony or the Rhineland to dazzle allies and intimidate rivals. You sip the wine smoother than the noble's banquet, but heavier, maybe 13% alcohol, and feel the buzz creep in. The king, a ruddy man in ermine, toasts his queen, then his knights, then some vague victory nobody questions. You're toasting too, though your arm's already tired, and the wine's making your head swim faster than the tavern's ale. A minstrel strums a lute, his song drowned by laughter and clinking goblets. A duke nearby, his beard flecked with wine, boasts about a hunt, his story growing wilder with each sip. You're wedged between a lady in silk who keeps refilling your goblet and a bishop who's suspiciously good at drinking. A quirky tidbit royal toasts sometimes lasted hours with wassail cups passed around, forcing everyone to drink or insult the host. You're on your third toast, and the lady's giggling saying you're not courtly enough for her spiced hippocras. Joke 1: medieval networking was just toast till you topple. You try to pace yourself, nibbling a slice of venison, but the wine's relentless. Servants glide through, pouring from pitchers with eerie precision, their faces blank despite the chaos. The king's now toasting a French envoy, his words sharp with politics, and you realize every sip here is a move in a bigger game. Alliances, betrayals, all sealed with wine. Historians still argue whether these banquets built trust or just got everyone too drunk to plot. You're leaning toward the latter, especially as the bishop starts arguing with a knight over a Bible verse, both slurring like tavern drunks. You sip again, the wine's berry notes fading into a warm haze. The hall's getting louder, the toasts sloppier. A young lord tries to stand for his turn, only to wobble and spill wine on a lady's gown. She laughs, but her eyes are daggers. You're feeling the wine's weight, your thoughts syrupy, and you're grateful for the table's support. You think back to the peasants' hovel, where ale was survival. Here, wine's a weapon wielded to impress or undo. The lady's pushing you to toast her health, and you mumble something about her radiance, earning a smirk. You're not sure if you're charming or just drunk, but the wine's making you bold. A jester cartwheels through juggling apples, and the crowd cheers, though half are too tipsy to focus. You notice a servant slip a coin to a page, maybe to keep the wine flowing or to spike a rival's cup. Court's a snake pit, and booze just oils the fangs. You remember the alewife's witchy shed all defiance and danger. This hall's no safer, just shinier. The king's toasting again, and you raise your goblet, your arm shaking. The wine's stronger than you expected, and you're starting to see why courtiers practiced drinking like knights trained for battle. Joke 2, medieval cardio was just surviving the king's third wassail. You lean back, the chair creaking, and try to focus on the minstrel's tune, but the room's spinning all gold and velvet and wine-soaked grins. The bishop's now singing, his voice wobbly, but loud, and the lady joins in her hand, grazing yours. You're drunker than you meant to be, the wine blurring the hall's edges, and you're caught between awe and panic. A page refills your goblet, and you groan, knowing another toast is coming. You think of the tavern's brawls, raw and honest. This is polished chaos, but no less wild, a dance of power and excess. The king stands swaying and calls for a final toast to England's glory. The hall erupts, goblets raised, and you join in spilling wine on your sleeve. The lady laughs, offering you her napkin, and you're grateful for the kindness, or maybe it's just flirting. The wine's a tide pulling you deeper, and you're starting to love this glittering, tipsy world, even if you're one toast from collapse. The minstrel's song slows, and the hall quiets just a bit as servants clear plates. You're struck by the contrast: monks' quiet brewery, peasants' gritty cures, and now this a royal binge where every sip's a statement. Your head's heavy, and you're fighting to stay upright. The lady's telling you about a banquet where a duke drank himself under the table and woke up betrothed. You laugh, then wince, the wine amplifying every sound. The king slumped in his chair, now his queen whispering to a courtier. And you realize even royalty can't outrun the buzz. You think of the merchant's mead, all cozy swagger. This wine's colder, a crown of thorns in liquid form. Joke 3. No wonder they called it Royal Red. It's got you pledging allegiance to the floor. You raise your goblet for one last toast, the hall's glow fading, and let the wine carry you one shaky sip at a time. You've barely recovered from the royal banquet's wine-soaked toasts. Your head's still fuzzy when you find yourself trudging along a dusty pilgrim's road. In 1385, the air thick with sweat and the faint sweetness of spilled ale. You're part of a ragtag band, merchants, widows, even a limping friar, all shuffling toward a distant shrine, their faces weary but lit with hope. Your leather flask sloshes with ale, handed to you by a gap-toothed peddler who swears it's blessed for the journey. Pilgrims drank to fuel their faith and nerve, and you're about to learn how booze kept these holy wanderers going, one wobbly step at a time. You take a swig, the ale warm and gritty, like the road itself, and feel the group's restless energy pull you along. The sun beats down, and your boots kick up clouds of dirt. Pilgrimages were massive in medieval Europe, with thousands trekking to sites like Canterbury or Compostela, often drinking to ease the grind. Historical records like Chaucer's Canterbury Tales describe pilgrims sharing ale and wine to bond bicker, or just stay sane. This ale's weaker than the tavern's small beer, maybe 1% alcohol, but it's safer than the stream you passed its water green with scum. The peddler's singing a hymn, his voice slurred, and you realize he's been sipping since dawn. You take another gulp, the ale's sour bite steadying your aching legs. The group's a motley crew, their packs heavy with relics and regrets. A widow beside you, her veil frayed, offers a sip of her own flask, stronger with a herbal kick that reminds you of the alewife's witchy brew. Pilgrims carried booze for courage, especially on bandit-plagued roads like this one. A quirky tidbit, some shrines sold holy ale, brewed with blessed herbs, and peddled as a miracle cure. You're skeptical, but the peddler's flask is empty, and he's eyeing yours. You hand it over, half expecting him to pray for a refill. Joke one medieval pilgrims probably thought one for the road was a commandment. You keep walking the road, stretching endlessly. The friar's telling a story about a saint who turned water into ale, and the group laughs, though you're not sure if it's true or just the booze talking. Drinking was part of the pilgrimage vibe, less about getting wasted, more about endurance and camaraderie. Historians still argue whether alcohol made pilgrims pious or just rowdy, but this group's leaning toward the latter. A merchant starts a drinking song, and you join in, your voice rusty but game. The ale's loosening your joints, making the miles feel shorter, even if your head's starting to hum. A cart rumbles past its driver, offering watered-down wine for a penny. You pass sticking to your ale, but the widow buys a cup, her face softening as she sips. You're struck by how booze bridges gaps, rich, poor, holy, sinful, all sharing flasks under the same sun. You think back to the royal banquet's calculated toasts. This is messier, more human, a rolling tavern of faith and dust. The peddler's now arguing with the friar over a relic's price, their voices sharp despite the ale. You're tempted to mediate, but your flask's light, and you're rationing sips to make it to the next inn. The road curves through a forest, and the group quiets eyes darting for trouble. The widow clutches her rosary, but her other hand's on her flask, like it's a second prayer. Ailey's a shield here, dulling fear of robbers or wolves. You take a swig, the warmth spreading, and feel braver, or at least less likely to bolt. The peddler's back to singing his tune bawdier now, and the merchant joins their laughter echoing. You're starting to love this chaotic band, their flaws stitched together by booze and belief. The ale's gritty, but it's growing on you, like the road's endless rhythm. A village appears, its tavern a squat promise of rest. The group surges forward, but the friar insists on a prayer, first his flask, raised like a chalice. You bow your head, smirking at the irony holy words, boozy breath. The tavern's packed, and you squeeze onto a bench, your flask empty now. A barmaid sloshes ale into a shared jug, and you drink the fresh brew smoother than your road-worn stash. You think of the monk's brewery, all craft, and calm. This is louder. A pilgrim's pit stop, where faith meets excess. The widow's telling you about her husband's death, her voice soft but steady, and you listen, the ale making you kinder. The group's getting rowdy, the merchant challenging the peddler to a drinking contest. You're tempted to join, but your head's heavy, and the road's waiting. The ale's a gentle buzz, now less fire than warmth, and you're grateful for its push through the miles. A quirky rumor floats around, some pilgrims believed getting drunk at a shrine earned extra grace. You chuckle, imagining the peddler testing that theory. Joke 2 medieval indulgences probably came with a tankard and a wink. The friar's now snoring his flask, tipped over, and you realize booze is the pilgrimage's true saint, guiding these wanderers through dust and doubt. Night's falling, and the tavern's glow feels like a haven. You're drunker than you planned, the ale blurring the faces around you, but you're not ready to stop. The widow offers you her flask again, and you accept the herbal sting waking you up. You think of the tavern, brawls, the royal wine, those were spectacles. But this is survival, a shared jug against the road's grind. The barmaid's watching her smirk, saying she's seen 1,000 pilgrims come and go. You raise your cup, toasting nothing and everything, and feel the group's pulse, one boozy, faithful step at a time. Joke 3. No wonder they called it a holy road. Every flask's a miracle. You lean back the bench, creaking ready for the next mile. One sip, deeper into the pilgrim's haze. You're swaying from the pilgrim's dusty road, the ale's gentle buzz still humming, when you find yourself aboard a creaking ship, the salty air stinging your face as waves slap the hull. It's the 1390, and you're sailing with a crew of grizzled sailors, their hands calloused from ropes and their eyes squinting against the horizon. You're clutching a tin cup of grog, a rough mix of watered-down ale and sour wine, handed to you by a toothless sailor who calls it sea medicine. Sailors lived on booze rationed daily to keep them sane and steady, and you're about to dive into their world of endless seas and endless drinks. You take a sip, the grog's sharp bite cutting through the salt, and brace for a voyage where sobriety's the real enemy. The deck's slick, and you grab a rope to steady yourself, the ship rolling with each swell. Sailors' drinking was a survival tactic, with grog or ale safer than the barreled water that turned slimy after weeks at sea. Historical records from medieval port logs show crews were allotted a gallon of ale, or wine, daily, often mixed with water to stretch it. This grog's grim like drinking a tavern's floor sweepings, but it's keeping your stomach from rebelling. The sailor, his beard crusted with salt, laughs at your grimace. Landlubber, he mutters, downing his own cup in one gulp. You're already feeling the grog's warmth, a dull fire against the wind's chill. The crew's a rough lot, English Flemish, even a silent Genoese who sharpens his knife like it's a hobby. They're shouting orders, hauling sails, but their hands never stray far from their cups, tied to belts for quick sips. A quirky tidbit, some ships carried beer ships, smaller vessels loaded with ale to resupply fleets, because running out of booze was worse than losing a mast. You're tempted to ask about it, but the captain, a barrel-chested man with a scar across his cheek, barks at you to drink or work. You choose the grog, its sourness, reminding you of the pilgrim's small beer, but wilder, like the sea itself. Joke 1 medieval GPS was just follow the ale barrel. You lean against the rail, watching the crew swap stories of storms and sirens. The grog's loosening tongues, and a young deckhand starts a tale about a whale that swallowed a wine cask and spat it back. The others laugh, tossing insults, but you're hooked the grog, making the story feel half plausible. Sailors drank to dull the fear of shipwreck, scurvy, or just the endless blue. Historians still argue whether these rations boosted morale or just bred drunken errors, like the ship that ran aground after a crew binged. You take another sip, the ship's sway matching your head's spin, and wonder how they ever docked straight. A fight breaks out near the mast, two sailors arguing over a dice game, their cups sloshing. It's the tavern brawl all over again, but with saltier curses and no barmaid to calm it. The captain stomps over, dousing them with a bucket of seawater, and they slink off, still muttering. You're starting to see the grog's double edge. It binds the crew, but sparks chaos. You think back to the royal banquet's polished toasts. This is Rawr, a floating tavern, where every sip's a defiance of the deep. The toothless sailor's back, refilling your cup from a cask, and you're drunker than you planned the grog's fire spreading. The sun's dipping, painting the waves gold, and the crew's quieter now, some singing a shanty about a lost love and a full flagon. You try to hum along, but the words slip away, the grog blurring your focus. A cabin boy, barely 10, sneaks a sip from a dropped cup, and nobody cares. Booze is everyone's right here, from captain to kid. You're struck by the contrast to the monk's brewery, all faith and craft. This is survival liquid courage against the sea's indifference. The Genoese sailor's watching you, his knife still in hand, and you sip to avoid his stare. The grog's bite grounding you. Night falls, and the ship's a rocking cradle. The crew sprawled on deck, cups in hand. The captain's telling a story about a pirate raid, his voice low but vivid, and the grog makes you lean in, half believing his tale of outrunning death. Sailors' lives were short, and booze was their shield, their joy, their rebellion. You think of the alewife's witchy shed all whispers, and risk this ship's louder, but no less precarious, a wooden world afloat on grog. The toothless sailor's now snoring, his cup tipped over, and you're tempted to steal a sip, but your own's still full, and you're swaying with the waves. The shanty starts again, and you join in, your voice wobbly but earnest. The grog's a warm tide pulling you deeper into the crew's world, where every day's a gamble, and every cup's a toast to tomorrow. The deckhand's back, offering you a crust of bread to soak the grog, and you accept the stale bite of faint anchor. You're drunker than you meant to be, the sea, and the booze a heady mix, and you're starting to love this rough, salty life, even if you're one sip from falling overboard. Joke 2, medieval sailing was just drink till the horizon stops spinning. The captain's eye catches yours, and he nods like your crew now, not just a passenger. You raise your cup, toasting nothing and everything, and feel the ship's pulse, its creaks and groans a song of its own. The grog's sour, but it's growing on you, like the sailor's gruff warmth. You think of the pilgrims' shared flasks, the tavern's dice, those were fleeting. But this is endless, a voyage where booze is the only constant. The Genoese sailor's still watching, but you're too buzzed to care. Joke 3. No wonder they called it grog. It's got you groaning with every gulp. You lean against the rail, the stars blurring above, and let the sea and the grog carry you one rocking sip at a time. You've staggered off the sailor's grog-soaked ship. The sea's sway still in your legs, and now you're in a dimly lit chamber, the air heavy with the tang of herbs and molten metal. It's 1375, and you're hunched over a cluttered table in an alchemist's lair, surrounded by glass vials, charred scrolls, and a wiry man in a stained robe who's muttering about elixir vitae. He hands you a flask of something murky, his latest attempt at a boozy potion meant to transcend mere drunkenness. Alchemists chased intoxication as fervently as gold, and you're here to taste their wild, weird quest for the ultimate buzz. You sip the liquid burning like fire and flowers, and brace for a trip that's anything but ordinary. The potion's a jolt sweet yet sharp with a metallic aftertaste that makes your tongue curl. Alchemists were medieval mad scientists, blending booze with herbs, minerals, and sheer lunacy to unlock mystical highs. Historical records like those from Roger Bacon's writings show they experimented with distilled spirits, early aqua vitae, believing it could heal, enlighten, or at least make you see angels. This concoction's probably wine laced with wormwood and God knows what. And it's hitting you fast, your head buzzing like a hive. The alchemist, his eyes wild, insists it's the soul's key. You're not sure about souls, but your knees are wobbling already. The chamber's a chaos of tools. A lembic's bubble. A furnace glows, and a caged raven squawks in the corner. You notice a vial labeled quicksilver, and pray it's not in your drink. A quirky tidbit some alchemists use toad venom or crushed gemstones in their brews, thinking they'd spark visions or immortality. You eye your flask, hoping it's just herbs, but the room's starting to shimmer, so maybe that toad's in there after all. Joke one medieval mixology was just add poison and pray for a miracle. You take another sip, the burn softer now, and feel the potion pull you deeper into the alchemist's fevered world. You lean against a shelf, scrolls crunching under your elbow, and watch him scribble symbols on parchment. He's ranting about the philosopher's stone, but you're more interested in his side hustle potions for nobles, chasing a divine drunk. These brews were status symbols, like the royal banquet's wine, but riskier. One bad batch could kill you. Historians still argue whether alchemists were proto-chemists or just glorified bartenders, but this guy's passion is infectious. He offers you another sip, and you hesitate. Your head already a kaleidoscope, but his grin says, refusal's not an option. You drink, and the world tilts colors bleeding into each other. The raven staring its eyes like black pearls, and you're starting to think it's judging you. The potion's not just booze, it's a mind bender making the chamber feel alive. The walls pulsing with secrets. You remember the sailor's grog, all grit and survival. This is wilder a leap into the unknown. The alchemist's now distilling something steam, hissing from a glass tube, and he mutters about capturing the spirit. You're feeling plenty spirited already, the potion's warmth spreading to your fingertips. You ask what's in it, and he laughs, saying stars and sorrow. Great, that clears it up. A knock at the door startles you, a noble servant here for a flask of dream wine for his master. The alchemist hands over a vial, his fingers trembling with pride or nerves. These potions were big business sold to elites, who craved more than mere wine's buzz. You think back to the pilgrim's holy ale, all faith and dust. This is darker, a dance with madness. The servant leaves, and the alchemist turns to you, his eyes gleaming. He's telling a story about a lord who drank his elixir and swore he flew. You're half believing it, the potion making your own feet feel light. Joke 2. Medieval happy hour was just chug the mystery juice and hope you sprout wings. You're drunker than you meant to be, or maybe it's not drunk. Maybe it's something else. A buzzing, starry haze that's more vision than buzz. The alchemist's now chanting his words, a mix of Latin and gibberish, and you're caught between awe and fear. The chamber's glow feels hotter, the ravens squawk sharper, and you're starting to wonder if you'll leave this place human. You think of the tavern's dice games, all reckless fun. This is reckless too, but lonelier, a man chasing the divine in a flask. You sip again, the potion's fire gentler now, and feel your thoughts unravel, each one a spark in the dark. The alchemist's pacing, his robe sweeping the floor, and he's muttering about transmutation. You're not sure if he means the potion or your soul, but you're too far gone to care. The flask's lighter now, and you're swaying, the chamber's clutter blurring into a dream. You remember the monk's brewery, all order and faith, this is chaos. A rebel's quest for a buzz beyond the mortal. The raven flaps its wings, and you flinch, spilling a drop. The alchemist doesn't notice. He's lost in his own world, and you're lost in his potion, a liquid spell that's rewriting your senses. Your head's heavy, but your heart's racing the potion, a tide pulling you deeper. The alchemist's story shifts. He's whispering about a rival who drank his own brew and vanished, maybe to heaven, maybe to dust. You're not sure if it's a warning or a boast, but the potion's making you bold, so you toast his genius. He beams, offering you a fresh flask, but you wave it off your vision already, a swirl of stars and shadows. You think of the alewife's witchy shed, all whispers and defiance. This is her kin, a brewer of the impossible. Joke 3, no wonder they called it aqua vitae. It's got you feeling half alive, half ghost. You slump against the table, the raven's eyes locked on yours, and let the potion carry you one burning sip at a time. You're still reeling from the alchemist's mind-bending potion, its starry haze fading when you stumble into a riotous village festival in 1383. The air alive with laughter, bonfire smoke, and the yeasty tang of ale. It's midsummer, and you're swept into a crowd of peasants, merchants, and even a tipsy priest, all dancing around a maypole strung with ribbons. Your hands grip a wooden tankard sloshing with ale, handed to you by a grinning farmer who's already swaying. Festivals were medieval blowouts, where faith and fun drowned in booze, and you're here to revel in the chaos, where ale flows freer than water. You take a gulp, the brew's familiar grit warming you, and dive into the festive frenzy. The village green's a whirlwind, jugglers toss torches, children chase a piglet, and a fiddler's tune battles the crowd's roar. Festivals like this, tied to saints' days or harvests, were medieval stress valves with ale as the lubricant. Historical records show villages could drain hundreds of gallons during a single feast, often funded by lords or churches to keep the peace. This ale's strong, maybe 3%, and it's going down easy, loosening your limbs as you sway to the music. The farmer's shouting about a wrestling match, daring you to join, but you're too busy dodging a drunken baker, waving a loaf like a sword. You're already buzzing the ale's warmth, a perfect match for the fire-lit night. A woman in a flower crown thrusts a fresh tankard at you, her laugh wild. You accept spilling half as you toast St. John. You're not sure why, but it feels right. A quirky tidbit, some festivals featured ale saints, effigies doused in booze and paraded for luck, though half the time they caught fire. You eye the bonfire warily, hoping this village skips that tradition. Joke 1, medieval party planning was just add ale and pray nothing burns. The crowd's a blur of color, red tunics, green cloaks, and you're swept into a dance, your feet clumsy but game. The ale's making you bold, and you're starting to love this sweaty, joyful mess. You spin past a stall where a brewer's pouring ale from a massive cask, her apron soaked, but her smile wide. She's the festival's heart, keeping the crowd fueled. Festivals were alewives' time to shine their brews, tying the village together. Historians still argue whether these events were pious devotion or just excuses to get smashed. But right now, it's both prayers. At noon, pandemonium by night. You take another swig, the ale's herbal bite reminding you of the pilgrim's flask. But this is louder. A communal binge, where everyone's equal, at least until the barrels run dry. You're dancing with the flower crown woman, now her hands rough from field work. and she's teaching you a step. You're butchering spectacularly. The bonfire crackles, sending sparks into the sky, and you pause to catch your breath, tankard in hand. A priest, his cassock askew, is blessing a jug of ale, his words slurred but earnest. The crowd cheers, and you join in the ale, making you cheerier than you expected. You think back to the royal banquet's calculated toasts. This is raw, a celebration of life itself, with booze as the glue. A man starts a drinking contest nearby, chugging while the crowd counts. He collapses at 10, and you laugh your own tankard lighter now. The farmer's back, offering you a sip of his special ale, probably spiked with something dubious. You decline, your head already swimming. A shout goes up, a mock battles, starting with men wielding sacks of flour as weapons. You're pulled in, dodging a powdery swing, and end up dusted white, laughing until your sides ache. The ale's fueling this madness, turning strangers into allies and fights into games. You remember the tavern brawl's ugly edge. This is different, a joyful chaos, where even the priest is tossing flour. The brewer's still pouring her cask, seemingly bottomless, and you're in awe of her stamina. You take another sip, the ale's warmth spreading, and feel the festival's pulse, a heartbeat of faith, fun and fleeting freedom. The fiddler switches to a bawdy tune, and the crowd roars, some pairing off to dance, others just swaying where they stand. You're alone, but not lonely. The ale and the energy wrapping you in their glow. A quirky rumor floats by some festivals, ended with ale baptisms, where drunks were doused in beer for rebirth. You hope that's not tonight's finale, but you're drunk enough to consider it. Joke 2, medieval spirituality was just get dunked in ale and call it salvation. You're starting to see why festivals were sacred, these moments, however sloppy, were what kept villages alive through plague and hunger. The night's deepening, the bonfire's glow softer now. You're slumped on a hay bale tankard, balanced on your knee, watching a juggler drop his torches to cheers. The flower-crowned woman's back, offering you a sip of mead. Where'd she get that? And you accept its honeyed kick, a sweet twist after the ale's grit. You think of the alchemist's wild potions, all mystery and risk. This festival's simpler, a shared drunk that needs no magic. The brewer's finally resting her cask tapped out, and you raise your tankard to her, a silent toast to the unsung hero. You're drunker than you planned, the ale and mead a heady mix, but you're not ready to leave this fire-lit, boozy dream. A child tugs your sleeve, offering a sticky pastry, and you take it, the sweetness cutting through the ale's bite. The crowd's quieter now, some sprawled on the grass, others singing softly. You're struck by the tenderness here, beneath the chaos, a community bound by booze and belief. You think of the pilgrim's road, the sailor's deck. Those were journeys, but this is home, a night where tomorrow's worries don't exist. The priest snoring by the fire, his jug empty, and you chuckle, your head heavy, but your heart light. Joke 3, no wonder they called it midsummer madness. This ale's got you dancing with saints and sinners. You lean back, the stars spinning above, and let the festival's glow carry you one joyful sip at a time. You're still buzzing from the festival's ale-soaked revelry, the bonfire's glow fading when you find yourself slipping into a candlelit chapel in 1380. The air heavy with frankincense and the faint tang of wine. You're surrounded by clergy priests, monks, even a stern-faced bishop, clutching chalices and debating scripture, with a fervor that matches any tavern brawl. You're handed a pewter cup of sacramental wine, its ruby hue, catching the light by a young deacon who whispers, "It's for fortitude." The church had a love-hate relationship with booze preaching temperance while guzzling with gusto, and you're here to unravel that holy hypocrisy one sip at a time. The wine's tart, warm, and stronger than you expected, pulling you into the clergy's conflicted world. You settle onto a wooden bench, the chapel's stone walls echoing with Latin chants. The church was medieval Europe's moral compass, but it wasn't above a good drink. Historical records like monastic inventories show abbeys stocked thousands of gallons of wine and ale used for sacraments, feasts, and medicinal purposes. This wine's likely from a local vineyard, blessed for Mass, but poured generously after hours. The bishop's lecturing about gluttony, his chalice never leaving his hand, and you're struck by the irony preaching sobriety while sloshed. You take another sip, the wine's berry notes softening the chapel's chill, and feel a buzz that's half divine, half defiant. The deacon's refilling cups, his movements quiet, but practiced like a barmaid in robes. You notice a monk sneaking a flask from his sleeve ale, probably smuggled from the monastery brewery you visited. A quirky tidbit. Some clergy claimed drinking was spiritual exercise, arguing wine honored Christ's blood, and ale built community. You're not sure Jesus signed off on that, but the monk's rosy cheeks suggest he's devout in his own way. Joke one, medieval sermons probably doubled as happy hour specials. The wine's hitting you now, a gentle warmth that makes the bishop's droning almost poetic, though you're struggling to stay upright on the bench. You lean closer, catching a whispered argument between two priests about alehouses, sinful dens, one says, while the other defends their charitable role. The church vilified drunkenness, but profited from booze-taxing taverns and brewing its own. Historians still argue whether this was pragmatic or just greedy, but the clergy's love for drink is undeniable. The bishop's now toasting a visiting abbot, their chalices clinking, and you raise your cup caught in the ritual. The wine's stronger than the festival's ale, maybe 12%. And you're starting to see why monks wrote such flowery hymns. Booze makes everything sound profound. The chapel's glow feels warmer, or maybe that's just the wine. A young acolyte, barely 16, is clearing empty chalices, his eyes wide at the clergy's tipsy banter. You wonder what he makes of this holy men acting like tavern regulars. You think back to the alewife's witchy shed, where booze sparked fear. Here, it sanctified a divine excuse for excess. The deacon's telling you about a feast where the bishop drank 3 flagons and misquoted psalms. You laugh, then wince, the wine amplifying every sound. The monk's flask is empty now, and he's eyeing your cup. You slide it away, protective of your share. A bell rings, signaling vespers, but half the clergy ignore it, too deep in their cups. The bishop's story shifts to a heretic who defiled a chalice by mixing ale with wine, a sin apparently worse than murder. You're tempted to try it just to see, but the wine's already got you swaying. The church's rules around booze were a tangle, sacred in mass, sinful in excess, yet nobody drew a clear line. You remember the royal banquet's calculated toasts. This is messier, a mix of faith and folly, where wine blurs the edges of doctrine. You take another sip, the tartness grounding you, and feel the chapel's pulse, a boozy hymn of its own. The acolyte's back offering bread to temper the spirit. You accept the crusty bite, soaking up some of the buzz, but the wine's relentless, pulling you deeper. The priests are now debating indulgences, their voices slurred but sharp, and you're struck by their human side, flawed, funny, and far from the pulpit's stern facade. You think of the sailor's grog-soaked deck, all grit and survival. This is softer, but no less intense, a battle between soul and chalice. The deacon's watching you, his nod saying you're holding your own. You're not so sure, but the wine's making you bold, so you toast to grace, earning a chuckle. The bishop's winding down his face, flushed, and he calls for a final prayer. The clergy rise some wobbling, and you join your cup still in hand. The wine's a velvet tide, blurring the chapel's stone into a warm haze, and you're starting to love this strange, tipsy sanctity. A quirky rumor floats by. Some monks believed drunkenness brought them closer to God, a holy stupor. You're half convinced the wine making the chant sound like angels. Joke 2, medieval theology was just sip till you see halos. You're drunker than you planned, the wine's warmth spreading to your toes, and you're caught between reverence and rebellion. The prayer ends, and the clergy shuffle out, some to their cells, others to a late-night feast. The deacon offers you another pour, but you wave it off your head, already a cathedral of fuzz. You think of the festival's wild dance, the pilgrims' dusty flasks. Those were open raw. This is cloaked in ritual, but no less boozy, a sacred bender in God's name. The acolytes clearing the last chalices, his yawn saying he's seen too many nights like this. You lean against the bench, the wine's glow fading, and feel the church's paradox, a house of faith built on barrels of vice. Joke 3, no wonder they called it communion. This wine's got you bonded to the floor. You step into the night, the chapel's echo, lingering one holy sip, deeper into its tangled heart. You've slipped out of the chapel's wine-soaked haze, the clergy's slurred prayer still ringing, and now you're clanking through a muddy field. In 1365, your borrowed armor chafing as you stagger beside a troop of knights. The air's thick with horse sweat, and the sour tang of ale sloshing in a leather flask, passed by a grizzled warrior with a dented helm. You're here for a drunken duel, a spectacle where ale-fueled knights clash with more bravado than skill their blades, as unsteady as their legs. You take a swig, the ale's familiar grit, hitting like a punch, and brace for a fight, where the real battle is staying upright. The knights are already swaying, their laughter loud, but their eyes bleary, and you're about to see chivalry at its sloppiest. The field's a makeshift arena ringed by cheering peasants and a few smirking squires. Drunken duels were a medieval guilty pleasure, often sparked by tavern boasts or petty grudges. Historical records like court rolls. Note, knights fined for disorderly combat after ale-soaked challenges, though most ended in bruises, not blood. This ale's strong, maybe 4%, and it's flowing freely with a barrel tapped nearby for courage. You're handed a blunt sword, more prop than weapon, and paired with a knight who's muttering about honor, but can't tie his own belt. You're no fighter, but the ale's making you reckless, so you nod ready to flail. The crowd's buzzing, betting on who'll fall first. Your opponent, Sir Hugh, downs another flask, his face red as his tunic. A quirky tidbit, some knights drank posset ale mixed with milk and spices, believing it sharpened their reflexes. Spoiler, it didn't. You eye your flask, hoping it's just plain ale, but the buzz is hitting hard, your grip shaky on the sword. Joke 1, medieval knighthood was just swing hard, love soft, puke later. You take another swig, the ale's warmth spreading, and step into the ring, the crowd's roar drowning out your doubts. Sir Hugh lunges his blade, wobbling, and you parry, barely your boots slipping in the mud. The duel's less about skill than stamina, and he's already panting, his helm crooked. You're no better, the ale blurring the field into a smear of green and gray. Knights drank to prove their mettle, but it often backfired. Chronicles tell of duels where both fighters collapsed, snoring before swords crossed. Historians still argue whether these brawls were macho rituals or just drunken idiocy. But right now, it's a sloppy dance, and you're tripping over your own feet. You swing missing wildly, and the crowd laughs, tossing crusts like you're a jester. A squire refills your flask, and you drink the ale's bite cutting through the sweat. Sir Hugh's telling you about a rival who stole his squire, his words slurred but fierce. This duel's personal, but the booze makes it absurd. His next swing clips a bystander's hat. You dodge your armor clanking and realize this is the tavern brawl's posh cousin, all pomp but no precision. You think back to the festival's flower fight chaos. This is grander with stakes as muddy as the field. You're drunker than you meant to be, the ale fueling a grin you can't shake, and you're starting to love this ridiculous clanging world. The crowd's chanting, and a peasant girl waves a ribbon, maybe for you, maybe for Hugh. You're too buzzed to care, but it spurs you to swing again, your sword grazing his shield. He stumbles, cursing, and you're both laughing now, the duel dissolving into a drunken wrestle. The squires are betting on who'll puke first, and you're a strong contender, the ale churning in your gut. You remember the chapel's holy wine, all ritual and restraint. This is raw, a knight's ego soaked in booze and mud. You take another sip, the flask lighter now, and feel the field's pulse, a heartbeat of bravado and bad choices. Sir Hugh's back up, his sword raised, but he trips on a clawed landing face first. The crowd howls, and you help him up, your own legs wobbly. The duel's over, more comedy than combat, and you're both declared victors to keep the peace. A barrel's rolled out, and the knights toast their armor, clinking like a drunken orchestra. You join the ale's warmth, softening the ache in your arms. You're struck by the camaraderie here. Booze turns rivals into brothers, at least until the next grudge. The peasant girl's still waving, and you toss her your flask, earning a smile. Joke 2, medieval flirting was just share your ale and don't fall over. The sun's dipping, painting the field gold, and the crowd's drifting to a bonfire for more drinking. You're slumped against a fence, sword discarded, watching the knights swap stories of duels gone wrong. One claims he fought a bear after a flagon. Too many, nobody believes him, but they toast anyway. The ale's a tide pulling you deeper into their world, where honor's a drunken vow and glory's a muddy tumble. You think of the Pilgrim's Road, all faith and dust. This is louder a clash of steel and stupidity, but no less human. You're drunker than you planned, the ale blurring the faces around you, but you're not ready to leave this clanking, boozy dream. A squire's singing his voice, wobbly but sweet, and you hum along your flask, empty now. The knights are sprawled in the grass, some snoring, others arguing over who swung harder. You're struck by the fragility here, men in armor undone by ale, chasing a fame that fades with the buzz. You think of the alchemists' starry potions, all mystery and risk. This is simpler, a shared drunk that needs no magic. The peasant girl's gone, but her ribbon's tied to your belt, a muddy trophy. You lean back, the fence creaking, and feel the night's weight, a mix of ache and joy. Joke 3, no wonder they called it chivalry. This ale's got you chasing windmills and barmaids. You close your eyes, the field's glow fading, and let the ale carry you one clanging sip at a time. You're still dusting mud from the night's drunken duel, the ale's buzz clinging like damp armor, when you find yourself slinking through a crowded market square in 1370, the air thick with the smell of breadfish and desperation. You're trailing a beggar, his rags barely holding together, as he weaves past stalls, his eyes sharp for an unguarded tankard. He's a master of scams, charming free ale from tavern keepers, with tales of woe or sleight-of-hand tricks. You're handed a stolen cup of ale by this wiry trickster, its sour warmth a familiar jolt, and you're here to dive into the gritty world of beggars, hustling for booze, one clever con at a time. You sip the ale gritty but welcome, and follow him into the market's chaotic heart. The square's a riot of noise vendors hawk wares, a dog snarls over a bone, and a minstrel's tune fights the din. Beggars were a fixture of medieval towns, and many were notorious for trading sob stories for drinks. Historical records like urban court logs describe beggars fined for false alms, seeking often to fund their tavern habits. This beggar, who calls himself Watt, flashes a gap-toothed grin and spins a tale about a lost farm to a barmaid. She sighs, filling his cup, and he winks at you passing half. The ale's rough, probably a tavern's dregs, but it's free, and Watt's already eyeing his next mark. You duck behind a cart as Watt works a new scam pretending to limp for a merchant's pity. He scores a jug of ale claiming it's for medicinal needs. A quirky tidbit some beggars carried relics, bones or cloth scraps, selling them as holy for a drink, though most were just pig knuckles. You're impressed by Watt's hustle, but also wary. His quick hands could lift your pouch as easily as a tankard. Joke one medieval panhandling was just cry till the ale flows. You take another sip, the ale's bite, cutting through the market stink, and feel the buzz settle in, making Watt's grin seem almost charming. You follow him to a tavern's doorstep, where he's now juggling pebbles to draw a crowd. A few toss coins, but a tanner offers ale instead, and Watt's eyes light up. Beggars didn't just drink for fun. Booze was currency warmth and escape from a brutal life. Historians still argue whether these scams were survival tactics or a drain on town's charity. But Watt's not debating theory. He's chugging his limp, miraculously gone. You're starting to feel the ale your head lighter, and you're tempted to try a trick yourself, but Watt's too fast, already charming a baker for a crust and another cup. You stick to sipping, watching his game. The tavern's shadow looms its door, spilling light and laughter. You remember the drunken duel's clanging chaos. This is quieter, but no less wild, a dance of wits over tankards. Watt's telling you about a beggar who faked blindness and got caught when he dodged a thrown apple. You laugh the ale, loosening your guard, and he slips you another cup, probably lifted from a distracted merchant. The market's pulse is relentless. Shouts, clinking coins, a pig squealing, and Watt thrives in it. His scam's a lifeline in this churning sea. You think of the royal banquet's polished excess. This is raw, a beggar's hustle fueled by ale and nerve. A watchman strolls by, and Watt ducks, his grin fading. He's got a price on his head, too many cons, too many stolen jugs. You're nervous, but the ale's making you bold, so you shield him pretending to haggle over a fish. The watchman passes, and Watt claps your back, offering a sip of his special ale, probably spiked with stolen herbs. You drink the strange tang, reminding you of the alchemist's potions, but earthier, like Watt himself. You're drunker than you planned the market spinning, and Watt's already onto his next mark. a priest who's too tipsy to notice his flasks gone. The crowd thins as dusk settles, and Watt leads you to a quiet corner where he shares a story about a winter when ale saved him from freezing. His voice softens, and you see the man beneath the scams, hungry cold, but stubborn. The ale's a warm tide blurring the square's edges, and you're starting to admire Watt's grit, his ability to turn nothing into something. You think of the festival's joyful chaos, all shared jugs and dances. This is lonelier, a solo hustle in a crowded world. You sip again, the ale's warmth grounding you, and feel the market's pulse, a heartbeat of hustle and hope. What's now teaching you a trick how to cry for a free drink, complete with trembling lip. You try it feeling foolish, but a passing maid tosses you a half-empty cup, her pity real. You laugh, handing it back to Watt, who downs it in one go. The ale's hitting hard now. Your thoughts fuzzy, and you're caught between awe and unease. Joke 2, medieval charity was just sob for a sip, dodge the stocks. You're swaying, but Watt's steady, his eyes scanning for one last score. He's a survivor, and this ale's his fuel, his weapon, his reward, in a world that gives him nothing. The market's glow fades, torches flickering out. What's telling you about a beggar king who ran a tavern scam ring, and you're half believing the ale making his tales epic. You think of the monk's brewery, all faith and craft. This is grittier, a beggar's rebellion against an empty belly. Your cup's empty, and Watt's gone, vanished with a wink, and your last coin. You're not mad, his hustle's a kind of art. The square's quiet now, the night cool on your face, and you're left with the ale's lingering buzz, a reminder of Watt's world. Joke 3, no wonder they called it beggar's luck, one sip, and you're conned into loving it. You stumble away, the market's echo fading one tricky sip deeper into its boozy heart. You're still blinking away the beggar's market hustle. Watt's sly grin and stolen ale fading when you find yourself in a grand hall in 1372. The air heavy with the scent of wax, wine, and treachery. You're clutching a silver goblet, its wine dark as blood handed to you by a nervous page who whispers, "Mind your drink, stranger." You're at a noble's feast, where every chalice could hide poison, and getting wasted comes with a side of paranoia. The room's alive with clinking cups and forced laughter, but eyes dart watching for a deadly sip. You're here to navigate this gilded game of trust and betrayal, where booze is both pleasure and peril. You sniff the wine, its sharp berry scent, masking any danger, and take a cautious sip, your heart racing. The hall's opulent tapestries of unicorns, tables laden with pheasant and gilded pies. Poisoned chalices were a medieval obsession with chronicles, like Froissart's noting nobles, dropping dead from doctored wine. The host, a lean lord with a hawkish stare, toasts his guests, his smile tight. You're wedged between a velvet-clad lady and a knight, both eyeing your goblet like it's cursed. The wine's smooth, maybe 12% alcohol, but every sip feels like a gamble. You remember the festival's carefree ale. This is different, a dance with death, where one wrong drink could end you. You sip again, the warmth spreading, and pray it's just grapes. A minstrel strums a soft tune, but the mood's tense. Guests sipping slowly. A quirky tidbit, some nobles used unicorn horn cups, actually narwhal tusk, believing they neutralized poison. Your goblet's plain silver, no magic here, and you're starting to sweat. Joke 1, medieval dinner parties were just, guess who's not dying tonight? The lady beside you whispers about a rival who fell ill after a feast, her tone hinting at arsenic. You're tempted to ditch your wine, but refusing a toast is an insult. and the Lord's watching. You raise your goblet, mimicking the night, and drink your throat tight with fear. The page is back, refilling cups with a trembling hand, his eyes flicking to a shadowy corner where a cloaked figure lingers. Poison was a noble's weapon slipped into wine to settle scores without swords. Historians still argue whether poisoning was common or just a paranoid myth fueled by too many bardic tales. Right now, it feels real, the wine's tart. But is that a metallic tang? You think back to the alchemist's wild potions. Those were reckless, but this is calculated a courtly game where booze hides blades. You're drunker than you meant to be, the wine's buzz mixing with dread. But you can't stop sipping. It's etiquette or death. The Lord's toasting again, this time to loyalty, and the irony's thick. You notice a guest, a ruddy merchant coughing after his sip, his face paling. The crowd murmurs, and you freeze your goblet halfway to your lips. The lady's watching you, her smile sharp, and you're tempted to swap cups, but she's too quick, draining hers with a flourish. The knight's muttering about a feud, his hand on his dagger, and you realize this hall's a chessboard. Every guest, a piece. Every drink, a move. You take a small sip, the wine's warmth, no comfort now, and scan for the page, hoping he's not the poisoner. A servant drops a tray, the crash cutting through the tension, and the crowd laughs. But it's brittle. You're starting to see why nobles drank so much booze dulled the fear of betrayal. You think of the beggar's market scams, all grit and guile. This is colder, a gilded trap where smiles hide venom. The minstrel's song turns mournful, and you're grateful for the distraction, though your head's spinning, the wine blurring the faces around you. The Lord's wife, a pale beauty, offers you a fig, her fingers brushing yours. You eat, hoping it's not laced, and she laughs like she knows your thoughts. The knight's telling you about a cousin who died at a feast choking on bad wine. You're not sure if it's a warning or just drunk talk, but you're sipping slower, now your goblet heavy. The wine's still smooth, but every swallow feels like a dare. You remember the chapel's holy chalices, all faith and folly. This is darker, a ritual of power and poison. The page is back, his hand steadier now, and he refills your cup without asking. You're drunker than you planned, the wine a velvet tide pulling you deeper, and you're starting to wonder if you'll leave this hall alive. A shout breaks the spell. A guest collapses, his goblet clattering. The crowd gasps, but the Lord waves it off, blaming too much merriment. You're not convinced, and neither's the lady who's now clutching her pearls. The minstrel keeps playing, his fingers frantic, and you're struck by the absurdity. Music, wine, and death all in one breath. You think of the night's muddy duel, all bravado and booze. This is subtler, a silent strike in a golden cup. You sip again, unable to resist, and feel the buzz deepen your fear, softening into a strange, fatalistic calm. Joke 2, medieval hospitality was just drink up. It's only poison half the time. The hall's glow dims, candles guttering, and the Lord calls for a final toast. You raise your goblet, your hand shaking, and drink the wine's tartness. Now a thrill. The merchant's recovering, propped up by servants, and you exhale, but the tension lingers. You're caught in this world where every sip's a roll of dice, every toast a test. The lady's watching you, her eyes softer now, and she offers her napkin, a small kindness in this snake pit. You take it grateful, and think of the pilgrims' shared flasks, all dusty warmth. This is colder, but no less human, a dance of trust and treachery. Joke 3. No wonder they called it claret. It's got you seeing red in every sense. You lean back, the chair creaking, and let the wine's dark pulse carry you one wary sip at a time. You've escaped the noble's poison-laced banquet, the wine's dark thrill still pulsing when you find yourself slipping through a low doorway into a smoky, women-only gathering in 1375. The air's warm with the scent of fresh ale and baked bread, and you're surrounded by a circle of women, spinners, weavers, a midwife sitting on straw mats in a widow's cottage. They're passing a clay jug of ale, their laughter soft but defiant, and you're handed a cup, its contents cloudy and sharp. This is a secret drinking circle where women carve out their own space to sip gossip and rebel against the world's rules. You take a swig, the ale's familiar bite grounding you, and settle into this hidden, boozy haven. The cottage is dim, lit by a single rush light, its glow dancing on weathered faces. Women's drinking circles were clandestine, a response to taverns and guilds shutting them out. Historical records are sparse, but court rolls hint at women meeting to share ale, often accused of unseemly behavior by nosy priests. This ale's homemade, brewed by the widow, her hand steady as she pours. It's weaker than the tavern's brew, maybe 2%, but it's warm, like the room's quiet strength. You sip the herbal tang, maybe sage, reminding you of the alewife's witchy shed. The midwife's telling a story about a birth gone wrong, her voice low, and you're struck by their trust, letting you into this sacred space. A young spinner, her fingers stained with wool dye, passes you the jug, her grin sly. A quirky tidbit, some women's circles used gossip bowls, shared jugs marked with charms to ward off eavesdroppers. You check your cup, half expecting a rune, but it's plain clay. Joke one medieval girl's night was just past, the ale dodged the sermon. The ale's loosening tongues, and the women trade tales of cheating husbands, stingy lords, and a baker who waters his ale. You're drawn in the ale's buzz, making you feel like one of them, though your clumsy pour earns a laugh. You're drunker than you expected, the room's glow softening the world's edges. The widow's leading now, her voice firm as she talks about a guild trying to tax her brewing. These circles weren't just social, they were rebellion, a place where women could drink and speak freely away from men's rules. Historians still argue whether these gatherings empowered women or just gave the church more fuel for witch hunts, but right now, it's a lifeline. You think back to the noble's banquet, all treachery and show. This is rawer, a sisterhood forged in ale and secrets. You sip again, the ale's warmth spreading, and listen as the spinner recounts, dodging a priest's lecture by hiding her jug under her skirt. The room erupts, and you're laughing, your cup sloshing. A knock at the door makes everyone freeze, but it's just a neighbor, her shawl tight, joining with a loaf to share. She's welcomed with a cheer, and the jug's passed again. You're struck by the community here. No lords, no knights, just women holding their own. The ale's gritty, flecked with husk, and you're starting to love its honesty like the women themselves. The midwife's now teaching you a drinking song, her voice rough but warm, and you mumble along, butchering the tune. You remember the festival's wild dances. This is quieter, but no less alive, a hidden pulse of defiance and joy. The ale's hitting hard, your head fuzzy, but you're not ready to leave this circle. The widow's telling a story about her late husband, who drank her profits and left her nothing but this cottage. Her tone's bitter, but her eyes are bright, and the women raise their cups in silent toast. All lays their shield, their celebration, their middle finger to a world that binds them. You think of the beggars' market scams, all hustle and survival. This is softer, but no less fierce, a quiet revolt in every sip. The spinner's now braiding a girl's hair, her fingers quick despite the ale, and you're in awe of their balance, work, drink. Sisterhood all woven tight. You sip the ale's sagey bite, grounding you, and feel the room's warmth wrap around you. A child peeks in the widow's daughter, and she shooed away with a laugh, but not before sneaking a sip. Nobody minds ales, for everyone here a shared strength. The neighbors talking about a market brawl, blaming the men's weak heads for ale, and you chuckle thinking of the night's sloppy duel. The ale's a tide pulling you deeper into their world, where secrets are currency and booze is trust. You're drunker than you planned, the room spinning softly, and the midwife's watching you, her nod saying, "You're welcome for now." You raise your cup, toasting their courage, and they cheer the sound, a soft rebellion. The rushlights fading, casting long shadows, and the women's voices drop their stories, turning to dreams of freedom, love, or just a day without work. You're struck by the intimacy here, a contrast to the chapel's holy hypocrisy or the tavern's raw chaos. The ale's warm, almost sweet now, and you're starting to see why they risk these gatherings. Booze is their power, their escape, their bond. The widow offers you the jug again, her eyes daring you to keep up. You accept the ale's buzz deepening and feel like you're part of something bigger, a secret kept in clay cups. Joke 2, medieval feminism was just brew your own and lock the door. The night's deep, the cottage quieter now, the women's laughter softer. You're slumped on a mat, your cup light, watching the spinner hum a lullaby. You think of the pilgrims' dusty flasks, the alchemists' starry brews, those were fleeting. But this feels eternal, a circle that holds fast against the world. The ale's a gentle hum blurring the room's edges, and you're grateful for this glimpse into their lives. The midwife's last story about a woman who outdrank a lord makes you grin, your head heavy, but your heart light. Joke 3, no wonder they called it women's ale. It's got you drunk on courage. You lean back, the straw rustling, and let the ale's glow carry you one secret sip at a time. You've slipped away from the women's secret ale circle, their defiant laughter still echoing, and now you're standing in a bustling brewhouse in 1380 Quoit, the air thick with the sweet, yeasty scent of fermenting barley. You're surrounded by brewers, men in aprons, faces flushed from steam and effort, hauling sacks and stirring vats under the watchful eye of a guildmaster, his ledger clutched like a Bible. You're handed a wooden mug of fresh ale, its frothy warmth a sharp contrast to the women's gritty brew, and you're here to explore the power of medieval brewers' guilds who turned ale into influence and controlled towns with every barrel. You sip the ale's crisp bite, waking you up, and dive into this world of craft and clout. The brewhouse is a hive of clatter, wooden paddles, splash in vats, barrels thud onto carts, and the guildmaster barks orders. Brewers' guilds were medieval heavyweights, regulating ale quality and prices while flexing political muscle. Historical records like London guild charters show they lobbied lords and even kings to protect their trade, often sidelining women like the alewife you met. This ale's smooth, maybe 3% alcohol brewed with guild-approved barley and herbs, no cock ale or toad venom here. The guildmaster, a stout man with a chain of office eyes. Your mug, like he's calculating its worth. You sip again the malty warmth, grounding you, and feel the brewhouse's pulse, a machine of power and profit. A young brewer his hand sticky with malt, offers you a taste of new ale, still cloudy but sharp. A quirky tidbit, Guild sometimes tested ale with bizarre rituals, like pouring it on a bench. If it stuck, it was good enough. You're glad this batch passed, because it's delicious, unlike the alchemist's wild potions. You're starting to feel the buzz your head lighter, and the brewer's grinning proud of his craft. Joke 1 medieval quality control was just sit in the ale and pray it's sticky. The guildmaster's lecturing a merchant now demanding higher taxes for inferior imports. Guilds didn't just brew, they ruled their ale a currency stronger than coin in some towns. You lean against a barrel, watching the brewers work with a precision that rivals the monk's brewery. They're not just making ale, they're building empires, their barrels fueling markets, feasts, and even rebellions. Historians still argue whether guilds stabilized economies or just bullied competitors like the women's circles into obscurity. The guildmaster's now inspecting a vat, his nod a seal of approval, and you're impressed by his sway. One word from him could banish a brewer to the fringes. You sip again, the ale's warmth spreading, and realize this brew house is a battlefield where craft meets control and every mug's a victory. The brew house door swings open and a tavern keeper storms in, arguing about prices. The guildmaster's unmoved his ledger, a shield, and you see the power dynamic guild set the rules, and everyone else scrambles. You think back to the beggar's market scams, all hustle and desperation. This is calculated a kingdom of ale where brewers hold court. The young brewer's back, offering you a sip of spiced ale laced with ginger. It's a guild specialty meant to impress lords, and it burns going down, making you cough. The brewer laughs, saying you're not guild material. You're not offended, the ale's too good to care. The buzz is hitting hard now, the brewhouse's steam and noise blending into a warm haze. A cart rolls out loaded with barrels for a nearby tavern, and you overhear a brewer muttering about dodging taxes by miscounting casks. Guilds weren't saints. They bent rules, bribed officials, and crushed rivals, all while preaching quality. You think of the women's secret circle brewing in defiance. They're ghosts here, their craft no match for guild muscle. You sip again, the ale's ginger kick, waking you up, and feel the brewhouse's rhythm, a dance of power and pride. The guildmaster's watching you, now his eyes narrowing like you're a spy for a rival guild. A bell rings, signaling the day's end, and the brewers pause, wiping sweat and sharing a jug. You're invited to join, and you do the ale's warmth, making you one of them if only for a moment. They're telling stories of a rival guild's bad batch that sparked a riot ale's serious business, and failure's not an option. You're drunker than you planned, the room spinning softly, and the brewer's tale of outsmarting a taxman makes you laugh, your mug sloshing. Joke 2, medieval accounting, was just hide the barrel and blame the rats. You're caught in their world, where ale's not just a drink, but a throne, and guilds sit on it. The guildmaster's now toasting the crew, his mug raised high, and you join your arm unsteady but game. The ale's a tide pulling you deeper into their empire, where every vat's a power play. You think of the chapel's holy wine, all ritual and hypocrisy. This is earthier, a craft that shapes towns and topples rivals. The young brewer's teaching you to check a vat's head, the foam that signals good fermentation, and you try your eyes blurry. He claps your back, saying you're half a brewer. You're flattered, the ale making you bold, and you're starting to love this sweaty, boozy machine. The brewhouse quiets as night falls, the steam settling the barrels still. You're slumped against a wall mug in hand, watching the guildmaster tally his ledger. His power's quiet but ironclad, a reminder that ale's more than a buzz, it's control, wealth, life. You think of the festival's wild jugs, the night's muddy duels, those were fleeting. But this is enduring a guild's grip on every sip. The brewer offers you one last mug, his grin daring you to keep up. You accept the ale's warmth, a final spark, and feel like you're part of their empire, if only for tonight. Joke 3. No wonder they called it guild ale. It's got you pledging loyalty to the vat. You lean back, the brewhouse's glow fading, and let the ale carry you one powerful sip at a time. You've stumbled out of the brewhouse's steamy grip, the guild's spiced ale still warming your veins, and now you're swept into a raucous tavern in 1386, where the air's thick with sweat smoke and the twang of a fiddler's strings. You're clutching a tankard of ale, its frothy bite handed to you by a grinning barmaid, who's dodging hands and insults with equal skill. The crowd's belting out drinking songs, their voices slurred but joyous, and you're here to join the rowdy chants, where ale fuels lyrics as bawdy as they are bold. You take a swig, the ale's familiar sourness sparking your tongue, and dive into this boozy musical chaos, ready to sing until your throat's raw. The tavern's a pulsing mess, tables wobble under tankards, a dog snarfs up spilled scraps, and a drunk tanner's dancing with a broom. Drinking songs were medieval glue, binding strangers into a fleeting tribe. Historical records like ballad collections show taverns rang with tunes about love loss and cheating lords, often laced with curses no priest would approve. This ale's strong, maybe 4%, and it's loosening your jaw, making you hum along to a song about a fox stealing a flagon. The barmaid's leading the chorus, her voice cutting through the din, and you join in your words, clumsy but loud. You're already buzzing the ale's warmth, making the room glow. A carpenter, his apron stained, slaps your back and teaches you the next verse, something about a nun and a barrel. You're laughing, spilling ale as the crowd roars approval. A quirky tidbit, some songs were ale anthems banned for mocking nobles or clergy, but sung anyway in defiance. You're glad the watchman's not here, because this tune's definitely illegal. Joke 1 medieval karaoke was just scream till the sheriff shows up. The ale's hitting hard your head light, and you're starting to love this sweaty singing mob, their voices a raw hymn to life's grind. You sway with the crowd, your tankard raised, as the fiddler switches to a faster tune, all jigs and jeers. The lyrics are filthy, something about a knight's misplaced codpiece, and the barmaid's cackle eggs you on. Singing was a tavern's heartbeat, turning strangers into allies over shared mugs and melodies. Historians still argue whether these songs were rebellion or just drunken fun, but right now, it's both a middle finger to lords and a hug to comrades. You think back to the women's quiet circle, all whispers and ale. This is louder, a public shout fueled by booze and bravado. You belt out the chorus, butchering half the words, and the carpenter cheers, refilling your tankard. The tavern's a furnace heat, rising with every verse. A weaver's trying to dance his steps wild, and he crashes into a table, sending mugs flying. The crowd doesn't care. They sing louder, toasting the chaos. You're caught in the tide, your voice hoarse but game, and the ale's making you bold, like you could out-sing the fiddler. You remember the guild's orderly brewhouse, all craft and control. This is its opposite, a messy celebration where ale's the muse. The barmaid's now teaching you a new song, her eyes daring you to keep up. You try your tongue tripping, and she laughs, tossing you a crust to sober up. You're not sure it helps, but you're grateful. A fight brews in the corner, two men arguing over a lyric, their fists half raised, but the song's too strong, pulling them back to the chorus. Ale's the peacemaker here, smoothing edges and sparking grins. You take another swig, the ale's herbal bite, maybe rosemary reminding you of the pilgrim's flask, but rowdier like this crowd. You're drunker than you planned, the room a blur of faces and firelight. And you're starting to see why songs were worth risking a fine. Each note's a spark, each sip a flame. The carpenter's now arm in arm with a tanner, their voices blending in a sloppy duet, and you join your tankard sloshing. The fiddler pauses, wiping sweat, and the crowd groans, demanding more. A woman starts a new song, her voice clear, despite the ale about a sailor lost to a mermaid's ale-soaked kiss. You're hooked, the story vivid in your buzzed mind, and you think of the sailor's grog-soaked deck, all grit and shanties. This tavern's earthier a village pulse, where songs are stories and ale's the ink. You sip again, the warmth spreading, and feel the crowd's energy, a shared drunk that's half joy, half defiance. The barmaid's back, her tray empty, and she joins the song, her voice a beacon in the chaos. You're in awe. She's the tavern's soul, keeping this fire alive. The song shifts to a lament, slower now, about a hanged thief who loved his ale. The crowd sways, some tearing up, and you're struck by the tenderness beneath the noise. These songs aren't just fun. They're memory pain and hope poured into mugs and melodies. You think of the chapel's holy chants, all ritual and wine. This is raw, a people's hymn sung with boozy heart. The carpenter's telling you about a song that sparked a riot, banned by the Lord, but sung anyway. You're drunk enough to want to sing it too, but your throat's giving out. Joke 2, medieval rebellion, was just add a chorus and duck the guards. The night's deepening, the tavern's glow softer as torches dim. You're slumped on a bench, tankard light, watching a drunk spin a tale about a singing ghost, the crowd half believing. The ale's a warm tide blurring the faces into a friendly haze, and you're starting to love this world where songs and booze make heroes of nobodies. The barmaid's teaching you one last verse, her hand steadying your mug, and you try your voice a croak. You think of the festival's wild dances, the night's muddy duels. Those were fleeting, but this feels eternal, a song that outlives the singer. Joke 3. No wonder they called it tavern tunes. They've got you drunk on words and ale. You lean back, the bench creaking, and let the music carry you one rowdy sip at a time. You're still humming the tavern's bawdy tunes, the ale's rowdy buzz clinging like a stubborn fog, when you find yourself in a plague-ravaged village in 1349, the air heavy with smoke, fear, and the sour stink of spilled ale. It's the Black Death's grim shadow, and you're slumped in a half-empty tavern, clutching a tankard handed to you by a gaunt barmaid, whose eyes are hollow but defiant. The few souls here, survivors, mourners, drink, to forget the death carts creaking outside their mugs, raised to drown the terror. You're here to explore how booze became an escape in this apocalyptic nightmare, where every sip's a rebellion against despair. You take a gulp, the ale's bitter warmth a faint shield, and settle into this grim, boozy refuge. The tavern's a husk of its former self, tables empty, the fiddler long gone, the floor sticky with neglected spills. The Black Death, which killed up to half of Europe's population, turned alehouses into sanctuaries for the living, where people drank to numb the pain. Historical records like those from London's coroners note taverns stayed open even as bodies piled up with ale as a desperate comfort. This ale's rough, maybe 3% brewed from whatever grain wasn't burned to fend off miasma. The barmaid, her hands trembling, refills your mug without a word. You sip the gritty taste, grounding you, but the air's thick with loss, and the ale's no match for it. A man in the corner, a tanner with scars from boils, mutters about his lost family, his tankard, his only friend. You're struck by the silence here. No songs, no brawls, just the clink of mugs and stifled sobs. A quirky tidbit: some believed ale could ward off the plague laced with protective herbs like rue or garlic. You sniff your mug, hoping it's just barley, but the barmaid's nod suggests otherwise. Joke one medieval medicine was just chug ale and hope the plague picks someone else. The ale's hitting you a slow buzz that dulls the tavern's gloom, but your heart's heavy, the weight of death seeping through. You lean against a wall, the wood splintered, and watch a woman, a baker maybe, clutch her mug like a rosary. She's whispering prayers, but her eyes are on the door like death might walk in. Drinking during the plague was defiance, a way to spit in fate's face. Historians still argue whether booze helped survivors cope or just hastened their fall, but right now, it's all they've got. You think back to the festival's wild joy, all dances and laughter. This is its shadow, a tavern where ale's a lifeline, not a celebration. You sip again, the warmth spreading, and feel the room's pulse, a faint beat of stubborn survival. The barmaid's wiping the counter, her movement slow like she's saving energy for tomorrow. She's telling you about a priest who drank here last week, swearing ale was God's mercy, then died in the street. Her voice is flat, but her eyes are wet, and you're struck by her strength keeping this place alive. The ale's gritty, flecked with husk, and you're starting to respect its rawness, like the people drinking it. You remember the guild's polished brewhouse, all power and profit. This is humbler, a refuge, where every mug's a small victory. You take another gulp, the buzz softening the tavern's edges, and listen as the tanner starts a story. His voice cracked but steady. He's talking about a neighbor who drank a whole barrel and danced through the plague, only to fall into a ditch. The few drinkers chuckle, a sound like breaking glass, and you join the ale, making you softer. The barmaid's pouring again, her hand steadier now, and you're grateful for her quiet care. The tavern's a bubble, shielding you from the carts outside their wheels, groaning under the dead. You think of the women's secret circle, all defiance and warmth. This is bleaker, but no less human, a shared drink against an invisible foe. The ale's a tide pulling you deeper into their world, where every sip's a prayer for one more day. A newcomer stumbles in a boy, barely 15, his face pale but alive. He grabs a mug, downing it like it's his last, and the barmaid doesn't charge him. Booze is charity, now a gift to the living. You're drunker than you planned, the ale blurring the faces around you, and you're starting to see why they drink. It's not just escape, but defiance, a toast to survival. The woman's praying louder now, her mug empty, and you slide yours over a small offering. She nods, her eyes grateful, and you feel the tavern's bond, fragile but fierce. Joke 2 medieval therapy was just drink till the reaper looks away. The tanner's story turns to a plague doctor, his beak mask useless after too many flagons. You laugh, then wince, the ale amplifying the room's despair. You think of the night's drunken duel, all bravado and mud, This is quieter, a fight against fate itself. The barmaid's humming now a low tune that feels like a lullaby, and the room softens just a bit. You're struck by the resilience here, people drinking through grief, clinging to ale like a raft. You sip again, the warmth of faint comfort, and feel like you're part of their struggle, if only for tonight. The night's deep, the tavern's glow dimming as candles sputter. You're slumped on a bench mug, light watching the boy stare into his drink, like it holds answers. The ale's a warm hum blurring the death outside, and you're grateful for this grimy sanctuary. You think of the sailor's grog-soaked deck, the chapel's holy wine, those were escapes too. But this is raw, a last stand in a dying world. The barmaid's watching you, her nod saying you're tougher than you look. You're not sure. But the ale's making you bold, so you raise your mug, toasting survival. Joke 3. No wonder they called it plague ale. It's got you drunk on hope and horror. You lean back, the bench creaking, and let the ale carry you one grim sip at a time. You've staggered out of the plague-ravaged tavern, the ale's bitter defiance still lingering, and now you're standing on a windswept hill in 1400, the air crisp with grass and memory. You're alone, clutching a final tankard of ale, its familiar sour warmth, a tether to the boozy worlds you've roamed, taverns, feasts, ships, and secret circles. The sun's dippin', paintin' the sky gold, and you're here to reflect on the legacy of medieval drunkards, how their thirst shaped history's pulse. You sip the ale's gritty bite, grounding you, and let the stories swirl, a tapestry of chaos, joy, and survival, woven with every mug. This is the end of the journey, and you're ready to trace the mark booze left on the ages, one last sip at a time. You settle on a stone, the village below, quiet, its chimneys trailing smoke. Medieval drinking wasn't just excess, it was a force, building communities, and breaking them, fueling rebellions, and sealing pacts. Historical records like tax rolls and chronicles show ale and wine as economic engines with brewers and vintners shaping trade and power. This ale, brewed from some villager's barley, carries echoes of the alewife's witchy shed, the guild's steamy brewhouse, the sailor's grog-soaked deck. You sip again, the warmth spreading, and feel the weight of centuries. Booze wasn't just a drink, but a current carrying people through plague faith and muddy duels. You're struck by its reach from peasant hovels to royal halls. The ale's familiar, now its herbal tang, maybe yarrow, a nod to the festival's wild jugs. A quirky tidbit, medieval wills often included barrels of ale as bequests, ensuring mourners toasted the dead properly. You imagine Wat the beggar scamming a funeral for a free drink, and grin the ale loosening your thoughts. Joke 1 medieval inheritance was just leave your kids a barrel and a grudge. You're drunker than you meant to be, the hill's breeze cooling your face, and you're starting to see why booze endured. It was joy, medicine, courage, all in one swallow. The tavern's rowdy songs, the night's sloppy swings, the women's secret sips, they're all here in this mug. You lean back, the stone cold but steady, and think of the church's holy wine, all ritual and hypocrisy. Booze crossed every line, sacred, sinful, rich, poor, binding people in ways sword never could. Historians still argue whether drinking drove progress or chaos, but you're leaning toward both. Ale sparked the peasants' revolt, wine sealed royal treaties, and mead made poets of fools. The ale's hitting hard your head, a gentle hum, and you're picturing the pilgrim's dusty road, where flasks fueled faith. Each sip you've taken from tavern to ship carries a story, a legacy of people who drank, to live, love, or just forget. You raise your tankard, toasting them all. The village below stirs. A cart creaks, a dog barks, and you're reminded of the brewhouse's power, how guilds turned ale into empires. Booze was currency stronger than gold in a world of scarcity. You think of the plague tavern's grim refuge, where ale was a shield against death's shadow. That resilience, that stubborn thirst shaped laws, markets, even art, those bawdy songs, still echo in folk tunes today. You sip again the ale's warmth, a quiet fire, and feel connected to those drunkards, their lives etched in every barrel. The hill's quiet, but you hear their voices, laughing, fighting, singing carried on the wind. Your tankard's lighter now, and you're swaying the ale, blurring the horizon's gold. You think of the alchemists, starry potions, all reckless dreams. This ale's earthier, a drink of roots and grit. It's humbling knowing each mug you've shared, from monks to beggars, was a thread in history's weave. The legacy isn't just chaos, it's community defiance, the human need to raise a cup even in the dark. You're drunk, your thoughts soft, and you're grateful for this journey from raucous taverns to poison-laced halls. The ale's a final gift, tying you to those who drank before you, their mark as lasting as the hills. The skies deepen in stars pricking through the dusk, and you're ready to let the buzz fade. The ale's warmth lingers, a gentle hum, like a friend, whispering you to sleep. You think of the barmaid's smirk, the night's muddy tumble, the widow's quiet strength. They're all with you, their stories a lullaby. The world's slowing, the village's lights dimming, and you're slipping into a calm, the ale's fire cooling to embers. You raise your tankard one last time, toasting the drunkards who shaped a world, with every sip, their legacy aglow in your chest. Joke 2, medieval history was just spill the ale, write the tale. Your eyes are heavy, the hill's breeze a soft caress. The tankard's empty now, its weight a memory of taverns, ships, and secret circles. You're alone, but not lonely. Their voices linger soft as the night. Booze built bridges, broke bones, sparked songs, and you've tasted it all, from gritty brews to poisoned wine. The stars are brighter now, the world quieter, and you're ready to rest, the ale's warmth, a blanket against the dark. You think of the plague's grim mugs, the festival's wild dances, they're fading, but their echo stays, a hum of life in every sip. Joke 3, no wonder they drank, they knew the stars shine brighter with ale. The night's fully here, wrapping you in its cool embrace. You set the tankard down its wood, warm from your hand, and let your breath slow, matching the rhythm of the wind. The village sleeps below its struggles, and joys tucked away like the stories you've carried. The ale's buzz is a whisper, now guiding you to rest, each memory of brawls, toasts, and secret sips, a star in your mind's sky. You're safe here on this hill, the world softening into a dream. The drunkard's legacy is yours. Now, a quiet strength that lingers warm as a final sip. Let the night take you its calm, a promise of peace. Sleep deep, wanderer, and dream of ale-soaked days.